are you going to start us up? I
Yeah,
mean, with
just give a bit, one moment, Betty.
so is it recording now? Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June Chelsea Land Use Committee meeting. And I'm just going to give you some ground rules. My name is Betty McIntosh, co-chair, along with Paul Devlin, who's the other co-chair. And this is our June meeting. Per the governor's order, we have been meeting remotely, and this meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube and will be accessible. The agenda and materials for tonight are public and can be viewed on the Community Board 4 website. I encourage you to sign up for e-blasts. This is really a message to the public. And you can get the agenda and a link to the documents ahead of time. If this is your first time to a Community Board 4 meeting, 3 things to know about the process. After each presentation, first, the committee will ask questions, comments, and then members of the public, attendees, can ask questions or make comments. Subsequently, the discussion goes back to the committee. On some agenda items, committee members next vote to write a letter of support or express their recommendations. Most importantly, how to get your voice heard so you can comment and ask questions after each presentation. And after the committee speaks, you must press the raised hand button on your screen. On mine, it's right at the bottom of the Zoom. If you are calling in, you can press **9 to raise your hand and **6 to unmute. The agenda has been shifted slightly. The third item, which is the 547 West 26th Street proposal to LPC, will be second. And the third item will be Starrett-Lehigh Terminal Warehouse rezoning application. Now, Paul is going to take over the introduction of committee members.
Hi, Betty. One correction I want to say is I think we're going to do 547 West 22nd first because it's the fastest thing and we should be able to move that through and get those people as fast as possible. Besides Betty and myself, when we're in person, we often ask our committee members to just introduce themselves. We do have some new board members who are joining us. So I'd like to go through committee members and just ask you to just say a quick hello, who you are, maybe what you do, what your passion is, but really kind of short. So let's just go around the table if we could. And Jesse, do you need to unmute everybody or are they all able to unmute themselves?
Everybody's able to unmute themselves, but I wouldn't everybody all unmute at the same time. So maybe if you can give them direction, it'd be best.
Yes. All right. I'm gonna basically read through the panelist list. So it's in the order that's in there. So if you see a name coming up, unmute it in advance. So let's start with David Holoka.
Hi, I'm Dave Holoka. I'm an architect, a preservation advocate, and I've been on the board and the committee for several years now.
Marty.
Hi, I'm a retired school teacher. I have studied urban stuff and taught urban stuff. And I am a Bronx River advocate, having written a book about the Bronx River. Nice to meet you.
Tina.
Yes, Tina, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been on the board, I guess, about 8 years. And let's see, I live on West 26 between 6 and 7.
Great. Brad. unmute, please, Brad.
Hi, Brad Pasquarella, CB4. I live in Chelsea. I work as an owner's rep and in development for construction in New York City and the tri-state area. Welcome to the board.
Bert? Bert Lazarin?
Maybe he stepped away for a minute.
Bert might have stepped away, sorry. Okay. Elzora?
Hi, everyone. My name's Elzora Cleveland. I'm an accountant, resident of Chelsea, and a human rights advocate. Thank you.
Hector? Is Hector with us?
Hi, everybody. How you doing? My name is Hector Vasquez. I'm a longtime resident of Chelsea. I'm also a member of the LA Chelsea Tennis Association and a resident of Fulton Houses. I'm pretty active in the community, and I'm happy you're here to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Keenan. I'm a writer, longtime resident of Chelsea. I am passionate about learning more about zoning laws for Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen.
Kit?
Hi, everybody. Apologies for the mountain man look. I'm coming off the end of a 4-day weekend. I'm a former teacher, former principal. I have
And dad, and proud dad.
children within arm reach because their mother has a very important meeting that she cannot get out of. And I live in Chelsea.
Mike Noble?
Yeah, hi. I'm co-secretary CB4. I'm retired now, but I have legal experience. So I try to lend a hand with the zoning stuff. That's it.
Tweed?
Hi, my name is Twee. Pronunciation is in the background. I'm an attorney. I'm also a Chelsea resident, and I'm very involved and vocal in the community.
I see Bert is back on camera. Bert, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Bert Lazarin, resident of Chelsea for 40 years. I don't know, lost count. I don't even want to count anymore. I am professionally trained as an urban planner. I'm also a psychotherapist and have a business in labor relations.
Great.
And I've been on the community board for a while.
And then we have our public member, Pam.
Hi, I'm Pamela Wolf. Bert, I beat you by a country mile. I've lived in Chelsea for 65 years. I just did the math. I'm a longtime member of CB4, currently a public member. Prior membership was on the Landmarks Committee, which melted into the Chelsea Land Use Committee. I am a preservationist. I spent the last 40 years of my career as a real estate manager for cooperative buildings in the neighborhood. And I'm on the building with all the beautiful geraniums.
Viren?
Hi, my name is Viren Brambert. I'm an architect and designer. I've lived in Chelsea for almost 20 years since my college days. I teach architecture at Columbia University City College, Pratt Institute. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have joining us today another member of the board who's on the Transportation Committee, Christine Berthet. Christine, do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm passionate about the streets, and I have been on the board for many years, so that's what it is.
Thanks. And we have a new member. I'm not sure if she's going to be coming on to Chelsea Land Use, but Bobby Barnett is with us. Bobby, do you want to say hello?
Sure. Hi, my name is Bobby. I'm a resident of Chelsea, and I work in affordable housing for the city of New York, and I was definitely interested in tuning into tonight's meeting.
Thanks.
You take care.
I think I got everybody. If I missed anybody, please raise your hand. And I want to thank everybody for indulging in the quick round of introductions. I know we haven't done that in a long time.
All just because you introduced other folks, we have a number of new members in the attendees section who are recent appointees to the board who have not been appointed to a committee yet, but they will be shortly. So I just wanted to acknowledge some of them are there as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see them.
That's okay. Alice Wong is here, member of the board. Peggy Q is here. And I think that's it, but I might.
And can you make it so that they can say hello?
I can make it if that's what you'd like.
You bring them, and clearly everybody knows Jesse Bodine, which you know, district manager extraordinaire, can't get anything done in this board without him. So thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. Peggy and there you go. Oh, there, you moved around. There we go.
Oh, hey, Peggy. Peggy.
Hi, thanks so much. This is my first opportunity to say hello as a member of the board. So honored to be with you guys to serve, you know, our neighborhood. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peggy. And were you able to pull Alice over to Jesse?
Yeah, I thought I did. I'm sorry. Oh, no, I did not. There we go. Alice? I'm not sure, maybe Alice is not currently at her screen or not.
All right. Well, in fairness to them, I didn't tell them I'd asked them for this introduction, so it's fine if they're standing quiet. All right. So let's proceed then.
All right. Just to make sure clear, Paul, I'm going to bring everybody that's not on the committee back over to attendee, just so it's clear on the screen who's here from the board to be voting tonight.
Yep, that's fine.
Thanks.
And also, do you want to move over the DCP folks? Anybody who's not on the first presentation as well, move them off the screen too.
Yeah, okay.
Up to you. But while you're making that transition, let's move into the first item on the agenda. As we said, we're moving item 3 to item 1. So it's the presentation and a vote on 547 West 26th Street. It's a Landmark Preservation Commission application for a proposal for signage in New Canopy. This committee and board has taken a position on this previously, so we think that this may be a very short and efficient presentation. So who's from?
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Rosen from Higgins Place Barth.
Hey,
I'll be
Julie.
giving the presentation this evening. Paul, do you prefer that I share my screen to run through the presentation?
That's fine for tonight.
That's fine. Okay, great.
So many presentations, I just made that allowed.
Sure. All right, let's see. Can I pull this up? I want to make sure all of you can see this. Okay. Is that showing up okay on your end?
Yes, it is.
All right, perfect. Great. So
Can
good
you
evening.
actually, could you do me a favor? Would you do it full screen? Yeah, I think you have some of the.
This is
It's not-
about as full screen as I can make it, unfortunately.
Okay. that's fine.
Is that okay? I'm always happy to, come back to any slides if that's helpful later in the presentation.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for having us this evening. I'm Julie Rosen from Higgins Place Barth and Partners. We are the preservation consultants for this exciting new project at 547 West 26th Street. The building will become home to an entity called Chelsea Factory. This is a new nonprofit performing and visual arts space, as well as a community hub. And just to tell you a little bit about Chelsea Factory, one of the primary goals is to help re-energize and re-engage the performing arts in New York City and to incubate new talent. In addition, they'll be partnering with community groups and local cultural institutions to develop programming. I also wanted to mention that their board actually includes someone from the Joyce Theater over on 8th Avenue, and they'll be helping to plan programming and assisting with some of those community coordination efforts. And the scope of work before you today, as I believe you mentioned, is the installation of exterior signage, as well as a new canopy at the street facade, and that's in preparation for Chelsea Factory's opening in mid-September. So 547 West 26th Street is located in the eastern portion of the West Chelsea Historic District, on the north side of West 26th Street, just east of 11th Avenue. The circa 1912 building was originally built as a garage, but in more recent history, it's been utilized for a variety of purposes, including a photography studio, a theater, and most recently as an event space. So this new use as a performing and visual arts venue is really the next step in this building's history. The one-story building, as you can see, is very long. There's actually over 140 feet of frontage, and it's quite tall at 30 feet. A couple of existing conditions photos just to reintroduce you to the building. On the left side of the slide are some overall photos, the west portion of the building shown on top, and then the east portion at the bottom. The architecture is largely utilitarian with subtle brick detailing at the arches and modern infill. There is a grandfathered canopy at the existing east entrance, and there's a small signage on the building. You can see that in this blow up here on the right. So in addition to that existing canopy, there's existing signage on top of the canopy and then 2 menu boxes on either side of that east entrance. I also just wanted to call out some existing uplighting embedded in the sidewalk. You'll see this in some of the later renderings. That's an existing condition and it is proposed to remain. And you may also recall a few years ago reviewing a proposal for new entrance infill at this building. I wanted to let you know that that work is currently under construction, and you'll see that in some of the visuals going forward. So Chelsea Factory is envisioned as a multidisciplinary venue, and spatial flexibility and adaptability is really key to the function of the space. So looking at the building here in plan, we have the front facade here at the bottom facing West 26th Street. The goal for the interior of the building is to be utilized as either one space, so that would be this full area here, or divided into 2 separate spaces for performance and exhibition. And there's this retractable room divider that will help facilitate those transitions. So we're calling this west space with its own new entry. We're calling that space A. And then the right half with its own entrance, again, we're calling space B. And you're gonna see those letters popping up throughout. Again, this is about flexibility of space and allowing 2 events to potentially even happen concurrently, which is really exciting, but that requires separate entrances and then also separate signage in order to make sure that visitors can get where they need to go. The proposal shown in this rendered view reflects the adaptability of the building uses while also respecting the symmetry of the building's exterior architecture. And we've grouped the exterior signage proposal into 3 main components. And those include building name and identification. And just to point out what each of those mean, we have new dimensional signage over the large arches. We're also reusing the existing canopy at the east entry and adding new signage. And then we're also adding a new canopy at the new west entrance to mark that space. And that building name and identification signage is really essential for visitors to be able to find the building. And that's whether they're coming from across 26th Street, from one of the avenues, or even up on the High Line. We need to make sure that visitors can find the building and find where they're supposed to go. Another key component of the signage proposal is what we're calling wayfinding signage. And that would be at the sidewalk level as well as at the building scale. And this includes that space A and space B signage, and that's installed at the storefront infill, as well as at the peaks of the building. And that's to help visitors identify which side of the building they're supposed to enter. And then the third type is programming signage. And that is found in menu boxes, one at east entrance, as well as a poster sign at that center pier. And that's about identifying the current programming that's happening in the building, as well as future events. And each sign and signage type very much has their own purpose and their own function. And the variety of signage is important because this building is so long and there are multiple entries. In order to inform the proposed signage design, we looked back at the signage types historically on the building, and we found that there's actually been quite a bit. So in the 1915 photo on the left part of the slide, this was actually taken only a few years after the building was constructed. There were already a series of small projecting bracket signs, and then there was also this large painted wall sign at that center pier. So that's been some of the inspiration for that new poster sign that you saw on the previous slide. And then by 1940, As shown in the right photo, there was a much larger projecting bracket sign and also a large panel sign that actually started covering up some of the historic building's architecture, which we obviously don't want to do now. As I mentioned, 547 West 26th Street was a purpose-built garage building. And so we also studied garage signage in the broader context of what historically existed in the area. So the designated West Chelsea Historic District boundary is shown here in red. I hope you can see that clearly. This is overlaid on this 1955 Bromley map. Our site is colored in purple. And as you can see, the historic district, the designated portion, is actually a very small piece of what was once a much larger industrial corridor, which spanned the far west side, basically from about 14th Street to 34th Street. And the map even shows the elevated railway, which is now the High Line running just west of 10th Avenue, all the rail lines coming in across the Hudson River. There were garage buildings scattered throughout the district, many of which are labeled on this map. And we were able, because there were so many, to actually focus our research on just those low-rise garage buildings. And those are called out in the blue dots. So we've included some to show you in the main portion of this presentation. Those are called out with the solid blue dots. We also have many more in the appendix. So moving on to that, these are those low-rise garage building examples I was just mentioning. Just a selection of many. What we found, interestingly, is that there was a wide variety of signage types used historically on these buildings. And that included such things as projecting bracket signs, a lot of panel signs, also a lot of painted signage. And we found that they were very often scaled to the building. They kind of fit into the building's architecture. And so we drew a lot of inspiration from these historic signage types. And then we also looked a little bit more broadly at the historic signage that was utilized in buildings within the designated historic district itself, which is defined by a much more diverse mix of commercial and industrial buildings at different scales. And so we found other examples of painted signage, which you can see here on the B&O building, panel signage actually found on the John Williams building, the Chelsea factory building is right here next door. And then interestingly, some of this arched dimensional signage at terminal stores right across 11th Avenue that really followed the kind of the flow of the architecture and defined these arched openings. And we found that very inspiring as well. So just quickly turning back to the existing building conditions, there's, again, a very limited amount of grandfathered signage on the building. It's located entirely at this existing east entrance. The existing canopy will remain in place and it'll be modified for the new building use. And then the existing menu boxes will be replaced and relocated as well. And then the proposed design, as you can see here, really responds to some of those historic signage types we just showed, while also meeting the needs of the new building use. And the signage follows a very symmetrical layout, following the symmetry of the building's architecture. It's also concentrated in the center of the building. So really going from this large arch to this large arch, focusing in on where the building entries are, where most people will be interacting with the building itself to make sure they can find where they're going. And because it's a little easier to look at this in elevation, I do want to make sure to just quickly take you through all of the different signage types here so that it's clear. And I'm always happy to answer any questions at the end if anything is unclear. But so starting at the existing east entry, that the canopy will remain in place. It will receive new letters saying Chelsea Factory, and it will also receive just some aesthetic little side panels to cover up some existing visibility of structure and conduit. And I have a photo to show you actually on the next slide. At the new west entry, there will be a matching canopy and signage installed so that there's a cohesiveness to the canopies at both entries, and they look the same and function the same. There will also be these new metal framed menu boxes with LCD displays. Excuse me. And those will be used to show the current programming information. There will be one at each entrance, and that will display what's actually happening in space A or in space B. There's also this poster sign at the center pier, as I mentioned, kind of reflecting the historic painted sign that used to be on this building right after it was constructed. And that will have visual information about upcoming events to get visitors excited about coming back. And then at the two larger arched bays, there will be dimensional building name signage. So these arched Chelsea factory letters, along with either a dimensional A or a dimensional B at the peaks, and then an A or a B painted at the infill as well. And we do have some details to share as well, just to make sure everything is clear. So the existing canopy design is very contemporary in nature, very streamlined metal fabrication. And the new canopy structure and signage will largely match the existing in the materials and the details and the dimensions. The new Chelsea factory letters, as you can see here in the top detail, those letters will range in height from 6 inches to 8 inches. That's similar to the existing signage that's there now. I did also want to mention that there is a very small concealed light strip on the existing canopy that will remain in place to just subtly illuminate that signage, and that will also be replicated at that new west canopy as well. And then here's that existing and proposed view of the east canopy I was mentioning. So that existing canopy structure will remain in place, and it will receive new painted metal signage similar to what's there now. It will also receive these two aluminum side panels just to hide some of that exposed structure and that exposed conduit and make the canopy read as a little bit more finished. So those will be installed at that existing canopy, and then they'll also be part of the new fabrication for that new west canopy. And then a detailed view of the signage of those larger arches. All of the signage that you're seeing here, so the A's, the Chelsea factory, that will be painted a metallic silver color. The dimensional signage is being utilized at the top of the building. It'll all be 1 inch thick. So that's for the Chelsea factory as well as the A or the B at the top, just to give it a little bit more depth and to create a little bit more shadow and provide a little bit more visibility from a distance. It's very important. The Chelsea factory letters will be 13 inches tall. The A or the B at the top or the peak will be 2 feet tall or 24 inches. And then the painted signage at the infill will also be 2 feet tall. Just to reiterate again here, the Chelsea factory signage is really about building identification, and the A, or rather the B on the opposite side of the building, is really about that wayfinding use. For the new LCD menu boxes, those will have painted metal frames matching the existing gray color of the entrance doors and infill. So the color you're seeing on this slide is representative of the finished product. The boxes will be slightly taller and wider than the existing units. And on the left half of the page here, there's I think a very good comparison of the existing on the left and the proposed on the right. As you can see, just a few inches wider, a few inches taller, but we're actually getting a little bit shallower than the existing, so they won't protrude from the building's facade or from the brick wall quite as much. They'll also be anchored into the building at the mortar joints so as to prevent any damage to the brick itself. And the LCD menu boxes will be used to display the current programming that's happening in the building. So the menu boxes will show the programming that's happening in space A or in space B or in the whole building if actually everything is open to one particular use. Really allowing visitors to distinguish between the spaces is very, very important. I did also want to just clarify that the menu boxes will show static images only, and they will be rotating the images about 1 image per minute. The screens will also have light sensors so that they can be dimmed in the evening, so they're responsive to changes in the light quality throughout the day. And this is the detail sheet for that poster box, which will be installed at the center pier of the building. It's 8 feet square. It will have a metal frame painted that dark gray color to match the menu boxes. There's a very small concealed light strip that will be running around the perimeter of the poster box, just again to subtly illuminate the posters, which will be utilized to announce those upcoming events. And then to end with a rendering of how the building will look after Chelsea Factory opens in September. The signage types that you're seeing here all serve very different and very important functions. They support building identification, wayfinding so that visitors can get where they need to be, but they also work cohesively to meet those programming and those visibility needs for the new performing and visual arts space. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Perfect. Thanks, Julie. So just as a reminder to everybody, the process will be that we'll call on committee members first to ask for any clarification questions. Then we'll open up to the public if there are any comments from the public, and then we'll come back to the committee for our discussion and vote and recommendation. So David, I see your hand is up, so let's get started with you, and then Betty, and then Pam.
Right, I can't see myself. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, and Jesse, I don't know if you can make it so I'm visible. I'm not to myself here.
I can see you, David.
Oh, okay, fine.
David, do you need the screen? Do you need the presentation?
No, I can see that fine.
No, do you want to refer to, should we ask her to stop sharing the screen?
No, it doesn't make a difference. Actually, if you leave it right here, this is fine. The one thing that I'm concerned about is the signage that's above the arch. And it looks like you've got about 15 characters under each peak. And each of those will presumably be fastened back with anywhere from 2 to 4 pins. And, you know, we're looking at maybe 100 or more holes to be drilled into the existing brick. And, you know, I'm kind of concerned about that. And I'm also concerned, it seems like a kind of an obvious solution to have the lettering echo the arch. It's very prominent. You presented an example of another instance in the neighborhood where that was done historically. But in this case, I think it interferes with the composition. It's a little bit like when someone tells a story and the next person tells a story that outdoes the first story. And I really kind of wish that the arch and its brickwork were left alone. I walked by there again today, and the brickwork is actually, it's very subtle and it's really beautiful. This is really a lovely building. And I don't know if, Julie, if you have a close-up of that arch, but what happens over the arched window, and you can see it in the nearest window here on the right, there's what's called a header course. The bricks are turned so that their ends are exposed, and there are 4 rows of header courses that create that arch around the top of the window. As I said, it's very subtle, elegant for an industrial building, and really beautiful. And where the larger arches are, that's actually 6 rows. And that has a very nice impact. And I'm just concerned that echoing that with the Chelsea factory and the letter B, it takes something away from it by competing with it. And also the letters in the arch and the letter B right out into the peak, to me, begin to interfere with the composition and its really beautiful simplicity. I mean, I really wish that signage varied from the architecture itself so that it didn't simply imitate it and kind of cloud the effect of what's there, but related better by contrast. So those are my comments.
Betty, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
This is not so much a comment, but this is for the committee's understanding that we will have our discussion and our vote, and we will be writing a letter to Landmarks Preservation, LPC. I don't think it was clear in the narrative from the applicant, so some people who are particularly new may not know that. So we'll be heading towards making our comments to LPC. That's just what I want to say right now.
Thanks. Pam?
What a beautiful building this is, and how unique in the neighborhood, in the community, and in the special district. I have to say, David and I think alike. My concern focuses on the signage over the entries and the letters, and it has to do just with the physical damage that many holes in that masonry will have to happen. in order to get that signage up there. That's a lot of holes. That's a lot of damage in brick, particularly if they're end brick. That's much less of a face facing out, and each one can fracture more easily if drilled into from the ends. Just the amount of moisture that will get into those openings can explode a brick. That concerns me a lot. I agree with David that the classic arches over the doors and windows is just a major feature of the building and of the beauty of it. I don't have any problem with the B at the bottom, the big painted on A and B. That's temporary and doesn't affect the masonry. I'm a little concerned. I appreciate the comment about how the panels will be mounted into the mortar rather than into the brick. That I appreciate that consideration, but I don't understand how it could possibly be followed through with the signage, with the lettering over the arches. One side comment is that with all the attention being paid to this lovely building, there is a waterproofing issue that's pretty clear on the east end of the building where there's a efflorescence. I'm assuming that's what that is and not paint. Maybe the owner should take care of that condition to stop further damage. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Pam. Marty?
Is the applicant going to respond to the questions that are the comments that were just made before I make a comment? Or should I just make a comment and let them do it all at once?
I was thinking it all could be combined, and then we can have Julie address them. If that's all right with you, Julie?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, let's get through everyone's questions and then do a round of answers, and then we'll go back to public.
My question is about the Caldwell factory. What's the history of it? Should there be a sign noting that there is a history of it somewhere on the building? And maybe you'll explain why you changed the name to Chelsea Factory.
Thanks. Hector? Hector, there we go.
I kind of echoed, yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of echoed everybody's comments as well, pretty much. I do have a comment thing about the lettering though. Someone had mentioned earlier, the Chelsea factory, I don't know. The lettering almost, I don't know, kind of bounces, it jumps out at you. And I believe they said it was an LCD, is that correct? I mean, is that going to change colors? Is it going to be, clash with the brick facing, which is lovely? I saw when the thing was actually opened up and renovated over the years, and it's been maintained pretty well as it is. The two Bs for the A and B buildings, I think it's a little much. I mean, honestly, it almost looks like a warehouse designation than anything else. Maybe in smaller lettering, possibly, and it's just aesthetic comments. Maybe instead of two Bs, you have one. Maybe on the lower doors would be enough. And that big LCD screen in the middle, it's a bit large. It reminds me of some of those Las Vegas screens, which are pretty bright and can be tacky at times. And I think it does take away to the traditional facing of the building itself. So
we've got Miles Davis playing. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Let's move to Twee, and then Hector will come back to you when you're.
I think I had similar question to Hector. I guess it's the LCD screen where they said that there would be static images, but they're rotating one per minute. And if it's dimmed in the evening, the question is, will it be off, or will it, and like dim meaning half bright? And those are the questions.
Thanks, Twee. Brad?
Yeah, a couple questions. Beautiful building. On that screen that we're looking at here on that image, it looks like two tree boxes have been removed. the right of the B, are those going to be added back? Which would be great. Also, if we could go back to the architectural drawings, I'm trying to understand where the B now is and the A. It looked like those was going to be storage, and we're going to lose. Are we going to lose the glass look in, and is it going to be blacked out? The interior layout, please. So, right where it says electrical closet, is that where the big window is?
It's just a brick pier. That's where the solid brick pier is.
So where it says storage, electrical closet, corridor, stair A, is that the big window in the center of the two doors? No, am I missing that?
There are small windows here and here.
Okay.
These are the big arched windows.
That's
So
the big
everything, the visibility will remain into the interior. Yeah, nothing's getting blocked up.
And the board, I'm just asking the board was okay of adding those doors left and right under the windows previously?
That's my recollection.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so I'm tree pits. I'm bored of removing the top portion of the sign. I don't really need the A and the B double, in my opinion. That's it for me. Oh, and also, I just want to say, because it needs to be said now, if there's jobs coming from the non-for-profit, we'd love them to post on the CB4 website. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. All right, so Julie, before we go to the public, do you want to tackle these issues then? How the signage is being drilled in, the history of Caldwell?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I have some notes. So I'm going to try to work my way through all of the questions. And if for some reason I don't make it to all of them, please, feel free to jump in. So in terms of the signage, the arched Chelsea factory signage, that will be kept away from the brick header courses that create the arches, so as not to actually disrupt the visibility of any of that architecture. They're intentionally held off of those arches so that they really are read as a separate entity. In terms of the installations, every effort would be made to install those letters at mortar joints. Those letters are very lightweight. They're only 1 inch thick. I do not believe that they require substantial holes to be drilled into the masonry. And certainly every effort will be made to make sure that there is not irreparable damage made to this building and that all of the work is conducted to high standards. While we're looking at the peak of the building, I'm going to mix some committee members' questions here. I do just want to clarify that the dimensional signage, the Chelsea factory and the B at the tops of the buildings, none of that is illuminated. It's just painted signage. There is no illumination coming from those signs whatsoever. There is a very small strip light at the signage at the canopies. There's a very small strip light illuminating the poster, and then we have the menu boxes. So there isn't any illumination happening at the top of the building. I think the letters are maybe reading a little bit bright in this rendering, but they're just painted signs. Maybe that's a good transition into the A's and the B's. In terms of why we have the A's and the B's both at the bottom and the top, that's really about making sure that visitors can make it to the right building. We need to have signage at the sidewalk level so that if someone's approaching from the north side of the street, they can see that signage. But what we realize is that people will be lining up for events. And if people are lined up, they may block the signage. So it became important to have another letter at the top of the building so that if people were coming from a distance, they could also find their way to the correct portion of the building, to the correct side. So that's why we have them both. The idea is not to take away from the design of the historic building, but to really enhance it and be respectful of the architecture and not compete with it by doing something that follows a different pattern or a different rhythm. It was really important to actually look at the building itself and respond to that design. In terms of hours of illumination for the LCD signage, the actual hours that the signage will be on are still being determined by the team. So I do not have, specific hours of operation to share now, but we're certainly happy to follow up with that once it has been determined. In terms of the tree boxes being removed, I do not have any information about that. That's outside the scope of this project and outside the scope of anything that Landmarks is reviewing as part of the Chelsea factory scope of work. And then I believe there was a question about the Caldwell factory name change. So just to clarify, so Caldwell factory is actually a modern name circa 2017 when the building was transformed into an event venue. The Caldwell name is based off of the architect of the building, Charles Caldwell. And so it was a kind of takeoff of the original architect and the idea of the industrial use of the building. So Caldwell Factory is a completely contemporary name. The switch to Chelsea Factory is really about keeping some of the familiarity of that word factory in association with this building, really making it about the neighborhood and about the new use and the new nonprofit that's behind this venture. I believe those were all of the questions I had written down, but Paul, please let me know if there's anything else I can answer.
So just to clarify then, because on one of your slides, I think it was slide 12, you do have one entrance says Caldwell Market and one says Chelsea Factory. So I just want to make sure that all signage would say Chelsea Factory. There it is.
Absolutely. This is the existing condition. On the left, that's the existing condition at that east entrance. And on the right, we're showing what the proposed signage would look like.
And you would be comfortable if the signage above the header bricks at the peaks were, we insisted that it went into the joist rather than into the brick itself. Is that something that would be feasible for you and amenable?
We will certainly review it with the team and with the designers to make sure that that is possible, but certainly, the team will work to make every effort to go into the mortar joints.
And how would you feel about the removal of those upper level? I mean, if it's at street level and you say people are queuing up and that upper level A and B is 30 feet above ground, I don't know that people are actually going to see it anyway. So, you can hear the voices of the people concerned about the destruction of the old bricks by putting in so many holes by so many signs. So if there's a way that we can thin that out a little bit.
The upper signage is actually very, very important. Again, the A and the B signage at the top is really to help from wayfinding from a little bit of a distance. So that's across the street from the avenues to make sure that people know which building is which in case people are lined up. So the A and the B at the peaks actually is very, very important for the signage scheme as a whole.
I see that Christine Berthet has her hand up. Brad, is your hand up new or is that still up from the last time? And then we'll go to.
No, she didn't respond to the tree pit.
The tree pit. The tree pit, she says, is not within the LPC purview, and landmarks preservation won't necessarily address a tree pit concern on the facade of a building.
Well, I'm asking the developer, are they going to try to get it back? And also, they always come back to us with flags. And are they going to come back to us in banners and flags? And by the way, this is New York City. We know which door to get into. So I think we'd be okay without the top A and the Bs. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Christine, and then Varen.
Yes, my observation from the similar round statement you made around the curve is always painted signs. None of them is fixed into the walls. So if you really wanted to be consistent with the history, I think you should paint the name and not install some signs which would not have been installed otherwise. I have a question beside that. The B at the bottom, the doors are going to be open when people you have a show, right? So the letter at the bottom is not going to be useful.
These are the doors here. These doors will remain fixed shut. So the A and the B will always be visible.
Okay.
The operable doors are at the entries with the canopies.
So then I have another question, which is whenever people are doing renovations, normally they remove the curb cuts because your curb cut is not active anymore. And I would ask you to, I would ask the committee to request that, because this is not a good environment for pedestrians and for your customers. And I'm with Brad about you should really bring back to your developers that they need to put back the trees.
As far as we're aware, tree pits haven't been impacted on the project, and the curb cuts also will not be touched, but I will be happy to discuss your concerns with the owner of the building. Just to go back to the comment about the applied signage, the dimensional signage above the arches, historically signage above the arches, like we found at terminal stores, actually was dimensional signage installed there. It actually was not painted. It was dimensional freestanding letters. So that's where the inspiration came from for this design. And we do feel that it's consistent with the historic precedents that we found throughout our research. I feel like there was another question.
No, that's it.
That came up. Okay, maybe from the person before you.
All right. So before going on back to more committee members, let me just check and see if there's anybody in the public who, oh, I'm sorry, Vera, I wanted to get to you. You hadn't had the chance to speak. Let's do Vera and then we'll come back.
All right, just to echo everyone's comments, and the main comment is the A and B letters at the top are not going to help you from a distance, because you're coming at a parallel angle. You're not going to see those letters, nor are you going to see the Chelsea factory signage up above the arch. That clearly you're just going to see it from across the street. The other thing is that how many times I've been at Empire State Building, I'm standing right there and people come and ask me, where is Empire State Building? Because they're already so close to it, they don't look up. So nobody tends to look up when they're near the building. So I think every comment that's been made so far is absolutely valid. I think your signage on the canopy should suffice, and minimal damage to the brick is what we request. That's it.
Thanks, Varun. So let's switch over quickly to the members of the public. If anybody from the public wants to make a comment or ask a question, I'd ask that you raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands go up in the attendees list. So, okay, we'll come back to committee members then. And let's start thinking about how we want to frame a motion or a vote on this. So Betty, did you want to add something?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is that the description of the project called it a community hub. And is there anything more that we should know about that? Or is it just that the community will be attracted to the performing arts and I guess art gallery stuff? And some items which maybe Landmarks doesn't care about or opine on, like the trees, the applicant could focus on that anyway, even if it's not something that Landmarks is discussing with you. And third, I don't quite understand the illumination sign going off again, on again. And could you perhaps just say another word about that? It seems like it could be kind of like Broadway or something. You know, I'm not very enthusiastic about that.
So to answer your question about the LCD signage, it won't be going on and off constantly. It's just that the technology is such that the illumination levels can actually change with the daylighting, so that when it's nighttime, it's not so bright that it's blinding. So it's a very kind of natural progression of illumination that will just allow it to feel natural within the streetscape. These types of signage are very common throughout the city on performing arts venues, and this is very much a performing arts venue at its core. And that actually leads into your other question about, what the community hub part of this is. And part of the programming and the goals of this space of Chelsea Factory is to actually engage with the community and to host community programs, have school children visit, have artists from within the community, in the building to develop programming. As I mentioned, Chelsea Factory is also partnering with local cultural institutions. They have someone from the Joyce Theater on the board who will be helping to facilitate some of that program and community coordination. So it's much more than just attracting people from the community. It's actually aiming to engage with them.
That's interesting. What popped into my mind was, gee, maybe we can have, when we can go in person, we can have a Chelsea Land Use Committee meeting in the building.
All right, Carrie, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to ask about the signage over the canopy. That's also illuminated?
It is. It's all the existing canopy on this east entrance. It's already illuminated. There's just a very, very small little strip light so that you can actually read the letters. That will be remaining in place at the east canopy, and then will be part of the new canopy design. A very, very subtle kind of splash of illumination. There's no direct illumination.
So just, hearing what everyone's saying and gut feeling about, 15 separate signs in a way, because each letter is its own sign for these Chelsea Factory A, B. You don't think that the illuminated signage above the canopies is enough to draw people's attention to Chelsea Factory?
It's very important to have signage throughout the building so that people can see it from all the ways that they're coming to the building. So while the canopy signage is really very helpful for people approaching at street level, some of the upper building signage is very helpful to identify the building from a distance. Again, people are coming from many, many different directions to this building.
All right, I can see the building identity. So David, before we come back to you, let's start thinking about some of the issues that were raised here. The respect of the arch and the end bricks, and that this signage is clearly, it's located above the end bricks that you mentioned. There's a potential to paint instead of inserting metal into the signage, and then the question about the 24-inch letters A and B at the peak. So let's start thinking about how we can tackle this. So Dave, you have thoughts?
Yeah, as far as the paint goes, one thing that I'd be interested in is reversibility. And that's part of the problem that I have with these pinned letters over the arches, that, and I don't see how, feasibly you could have these signs, these letters prefabricated in a factory in such a way that when you went to put them up, the pins would line up perfectly with the joints. I mean, it would be a huge effort to create something like that. And if there are, in fact, about 100 holes in the brickwork down the line, when this place becomes a different use and the Chelsea Factory signs are taken down, I wouldn't want to see a bunch of little holes in the brickwork, even patched holes that kind of echoed the outer arch. So this doesn't seem reversible to me. Paint removal would be an issue even if they were painted on. In terms of visibility, at one point there were banner signs here, the brackets are still there. And it seems to me that visibility from up and down the street is probably a more critical issue than from directly across. And those brackets are already there. There's not an issue of damaging the brick to put them in. And even though I'd like to propose for our letter that we oppose the lettering over the arches, it seems to me that there'd be a much less destructive way to introduce something like that if it were to be done, which is simply to create some arching rails, like a pair of rails that the letters would mount to, and the rails would be painted like a flat dark color, and they would be separately mounted to the brick, maybe with just 4 or 6 or 8 pins with an adjustable design so that the pins could actually go into the joints. You see signs like this all over the place. But, you know, I don't know quite how we phrase that in a letter to the Landmarks Commission. You know, if we're going to oppose the lettering in that location to begin with, maybe we simply say that if nonetheless such signage were installed, we would propose that it be done not with each letter individually pinned to the brick. And Julie, I just wanted to ask, maybe you could, is there another image of the facade that doesn't show the proposed Chelsea factory arched sign that we could toggle back and forth so we can kind of judge the impact of it? Like an existing condition
I'm happy
photo?
to flip earlier in the presentation. There's not a direct existing proposed. This is probably the best slide to look at.
Yeah, and you can see how different it is. You know, it's almost, it has a certain spareness. And I think part of what's so wonderful about these buildings is the economy of means by which it achieves such a wonderful effect. It's just that profile with the kind of shallow pitch, the arched openings, and the kind of fan of header course brickwork around the tops. And I, you know, that's just such a successful kind of minimalist maximum bang for the buck that I hate to see it complicated with signage that doesn't act sort of as signage that serves, but as an alteration of the composition.
So David, do you feel that you can see in that lower left image, there's a banner? Are you suggesting that instead of putting lettering above the arches that they use banners like that because the posts already exist?
I think the banner is less distracting from that kind of minimalist original effect.
And Brad, you mentioned banners too. So what's your reaction to that banner on that image?
That's what I'm saying. I just think you're going to see that more sticking out off the sidewalk. And I think the metalwork's already there in the building. So I think the board should consider, you know, not the above signage and allowing them to go back to the drawing board and draw up some banners.
All right, thanks, Brad. Pam?
Well, again, I agree with David and with Brad's opinions. Looking at the buildings without the signage, they are truly beautiful, and the signage is just a distraction from that. I think that Julie, I don't think enough credit is given to, as Brad said, to New York citizens who have a way of being able to find where they're supposed to be going. I'm curious that you've said that you expect to have lines outside the building so much that it obstructs the signage at the bottoms of the doors. Is there not space within the buildings for people to line up for admission to things? It seems to me a little curious that you're expecting to be using the sidewalk as a waiting room for people to get admission into these events. I'm curious about that. I am truly worried, concerned about the pincushion effect of the many holes, tiny though they might be, in the arches, in the bricks of the arches. It's so destructive. It really is. David's suggestion of mounting the lettering, if this is the end answer to it, if LPC approves some kind of signage in that way, to mount them on railings that can then be mounted to the building. And indeed, we should be able to explain that to LPC in a letter in such a way that they will also understand. As far as the big B, the big A and the big B on the top, I think it has to go. It really is so distracting, and it's just not attractive, doesn't it? And people will find their way. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. We'll go Mike, Vera, and then Kit. So Mike?
Yeah, I'm in agreement on the letters at the top. I don't think they're necessary. But I asked David this question in terms of adhering those letters to the facade. There's all kinds of industrial strength adhesives these days where people put, very heavy things together with, adhesives rather than, screws and bolts and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that was considered or not. I mean, is that a possibility, or is it destructive? Are those things destructive? That's my question.
Well, ordinarily, the brick has a protective glaze on it that comes from its firing. And if you look at the facade of this building, half that glaze is gone now already. And yet it's still very beautiful brickwork. And I wouldn't want to propose, doing anything that would cause further destruction. The standard technology for letters like this is, pins that go into the substrate.
Viren?
No, I just wanted to quickly sort of echo what David just said a few minutes ago, that reversibility is extremely important. Ownership might change, the name of the building might change, the programming might change. We're not going to sort of take the chance of, nailing these letters in and out as and when. So I think it absolutely makes sense that if you really are looking at preserving the brick, not doing any signage on the brick would be my vote.
Thanks, Viren. Kit?
Thanks, Paul. I have what I imagine is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's led field trips. I think the signage, the unpopular big A's and B's actually could be very helpful. As someone who's walked backwards with, 20 to 30 kids at a time, trying to figure out, do I go to this entrance or this entrance, actually is a big deal. And that's why when you go to large venues with multiple spaces, they have very clearly labeled entrances for the different areas that you enter. And so, I understand where folks are coming from with the concerns around the extent of the damage to the bricks. And I thought that the solution that David proposed to try to minimize that seemed like a really promising workaround. But I think there's a big difference between an adult coming to an event at night, being able to figure out, do I go to A or B? And some of the other groups that this nonprofit is hoping are going to be able to take advantage of this space. And I would just encourage us to think about all the different use cases and the fact that making it really clear where you're supposed to go is helpful.
And Kit, based on that experience, would you say that if those banners were in place where the post, you can see in this image, there are posts there, and we saw an earlier image of banners. Do you think those banners would be efficient and productive for that tour group you're thinking of?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting potential solution as well. I think them being high and large is what really matters, so that a teacher or a assistant principal can quickly scan and see, and then actually spend the rest of their time making sure that kids aren't getting, hit by cars by stepping into traffic. And so, yeah, I thought that was a good idea as well.
Right. So, Julie, what are your thoughts on those posts for the banners that, as David points out, the damage to the brick is already done and those posts exist? What do you feel your client would feel about doing banners there instead of the lettering above the arches?
We're certainly happy to share your comments and your suggestions with the team. I can't commit to anything now, but we're definitely happy to explore that internally.
Right, because it seems to me that there's a pretty loud consensus here that we don't want that much damage done to the bricks, that we want the upper level 24-inch A's and B's. If we can do banners, that would seem to be a good solution, because there is already brick damage done. We can add it in. So remove the lettering above the arches, because as pointed out, those name changes may happen over time. It may be called Chelsea Factory now, and in 20 years, it might be something else. And the A's and B's above at the height just seem to be superfluous damage to the bricks. Doesn't seem necessary. I haven't heard any complaints about the generically, the LCD signage, the canopy lighting over those signs. So that seems to be moving along. So what I'd like to do is see if we can't get a motion that we can have a discussion on, as a specific motion that would entail removal of the lettering and instead installation of banners at the existing posts, and approval of the canopy and LCD signage as it is. So David, I see your hand up, so I'm gonna see if.
Yeah, that's still up from before, but I'll make a motion for such a letter.
Can we add the trees and the curb cut issue?
Hold on. I heard Carrie second it, and Twee's hand was up, and then I'll come to you, Viren.
Yeah, no, actually, Julie was going to get back to me about what the hours were for the lighting, and I really didn't get a clear answer as to dimming meant 50% or not.
Julie, do you want to address the timing of the LCD lighting on those signs?
That the timing that they'll be on is still being determined by Chelsea Factory.
Okay, so no answer to that, Tweet. Sorry. Okay, Viren.
Just very quickly to sort of reiterate our sort of request for the trees to come back and the curb cut to disappear, because it is actually a kind of tripping hazard when the vehicles are not going to be going in and out. So we don't need that on the sidewalk.
I agree that that language should be in our letter, Viren. I have to figure out a way to address it to LPC. Won't take a position on that, but I want to certainly communicate with Julie and her team that tree pits and removal of curb cuts as the work goes on is critical to this community. And that if we can get trees planted and curb cuts removed, that'd be great. Kit?
Yeah, just really quickly, I wonder if we could include some language about being generally supportive of the future intended use of the space. It seems like it would be a really great addition to the neighborhood, especially in this moment in time when the theater community is reeling and trying to recover from the pandemic. I know that we are the land use committee, and therefore we are focused on the architectural design, and we should be. But I also think that, you know, we represent the community and are supposed to be advocating for projects like this that will enrich our neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's great language, Kit. I agree. We should have that in there. All right, so we have the motion to the applicant is technically asking for approval of the signage of the canopy and the LCD lightings and the lettering above the arches, including Chelsea Factory and the letters A and B. It seems that what we're going to be saying to them is we do not approve of the lettering above the arches and the 24-inch A's and B's, but instead we propose they utilize the existing banner posts that have already provided damage to the bricks, and that will make comments about the great contribution to the community of having the center here. We'll make requests for tree pits and curb cut removals. Is that, anybody have any questions on, and that Marty, I see your hand went up.
Thank you. There was a question about waiting rooms on the sidewalk that was brought up.
I think it's just a matter of queuing for events, just like any theater or production hall. Sometimes people queue up on a street instead of, you know, as they're waiting to get their tickets and go in, there's just queues on the sidewalks.
It's a non-issue.
I second the motion.
Is the sidewalk issue a non-issue? Is that what you're saying, Paul?
I don't think it's a non-issue, Marty. I think that as any event hall, you know, we have to constantly struggle with overcrowding of sidewalks. I think that, you know, Christine's point about, and Kit's reinforcement of the idea of removal of the curb cuts and making it such that the pedestrians stay on the sidewalk and don't go into the street for safety reasons makes some sense.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we have the motion on the floor. Julie, would you do me a favor and stop screen share?
Absolutely.
Thanks. And Christine, I saw your hand go up. Do you have another question or statement to make?
No, I think Dave had a plan B proposal that I thought you were going to put in.
Right, we need just
installing the rack with the rack to minimize the use of the letters.
Yeah, we did talk about having an installation of a bracket system that would support lettering, but it seemed to me that the majority of people seem to agree with the notion of using the existing banner posts that have already damaged the bricks and installing banners instead.
Right. You know, maybe we could include a sentence that said something like, should the Landmarks Commission decide in favor of the arched lettering, regardless of our recommendation, we might suggest blah, blah, blah. I think that's what you might have had in mind, Pamela, when you said there are ways to say it. And I see your viewer and is raising his hand.
Yeah, and I think that the issue is that the damage to the bricks, as Pamela pointed out, they don't want to be drilling into bricks. If they want to drill into joints, then that might be reasonable. But to drill into bricks would damage 100-year-old and never be repairable. So, Viren?
Yeah, no, I was just going to caution that when you have all the letters on a rack or an arch sort of steel member, you actually have a lot more weight, and that can actually potentially pose more issues how you anchor it into the brick wall. So, there are pros and cons to both.
Yeah, okay.
True.
I withdraw my comment.
Too late, Christine. Great. All right. So we have a motion on the floor. Let's call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Anybody present not eligible? So great, unanimous vote. Okay, so Julie, again, thank you very much for your time. This is a terrific building. It's a great asset to the community. We're very excited about the prospects of what's going in. You've clearly heard the concerns about the damage to the bricks, and that's really what the focus is. And so let's try to find a better solution on that. And if we can utilize those banners that exist already, the posts are already in the bricks. So let's see if we can't do something with that instead.
Can I just real quickly, Julie, do you have a date for your hearing with LPC yet?
We are currently scheduled for July 13th.
Okay. So we should talk about this going to
And I believe they will finalize the agenda soon.
Okay.
Great. All right. Yeah. So Jesse, I think this will likely have to get written this week and go to exec and then full board for not approval. What's the word we use?
Ratification.
Ratification. Thank you. All right, Julie, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
It's a great project. We're all very happy about this.
Great. Thank you. Have a nice night.
Good. Thanks. Okay, on to item number 2, which was where is my agenda?
Citywide text amendment for health and fitness.
There we go. Thank you, Betty. So the DCP is here to make a presentation on the zoning text amendment. As committee members are aware, the mayor has been pushing through a lot of zoning text amendments. This is, I think, our 3rd or 4th this month. And this is a citywide issue. So we're going to try to take a viewpoint from our community, but also keep in mind that it's a citywide zoning text amendment. So Andrew, I see you have been moved over into position.
Great. Thanks for having me. My name is Andy Kanthu. I'm a planner with the Manhattan office at DCP, and I'm joined by my colleague Sylvia Lee, who I'm sure you all know. Let me just share my screen really quick. Okay. Sorry, I'm like the least technologically savvy millennial ever meet.
It's better than us Gen Xers, so.
All right, can we see this?
We can, thank you.
Great. So I am here to present our proposal, the city's proposal, for a citywide text amendment to allow health and fitness facilities like gyms and spas as of right in more areas of the city. And the purpose of this text amendment is really to provide health-related amenities to more communities across the city and hopefully, cut some red tape for businesses, especially during this really critical post-pandemic economic recovery period. So as most of you know, in order to operate a gym, a spa, or licensed massage therapy studio, and a range of other health and fitness facilities in New York City, you have to first obtain a special permit from the Board of Standards and Appeals, or the BSA. And all of these uses fall under the umbrella term in zoning speak of physical culture or health establishments, or PCEs. So I'll be using that term throughout the presentation. There are a few limited areas of the city, mostly special districts, none of which are in CB4, where you can open a PCE without first obtaining a special permit, but in most cases, a special permit is required. And even if a business wanted to apply for a special permit, they aren't allowed along many local commercial streets, including areas where we today allow other local retail and service uses. So for example, the C1 commercial overlays along 9th Avenue and Hell's Kitchen, if you're familiar with that stretch, businesses aren't even eligible to apply for a special permit, much less get permission to operate. And even when you are eligible, the process of obtaining a special permit is extremely costly and time consuming for businesses. And these health and fitness facilities that are impacted by this proposal include a range of activities that we're all really familiar with, including your larger commercial gyms, chains like Blink or Planet Fitness or New York sports clubs, to your smaller, independent storefront gyms that exist across the city. They also include studios like martial arts, yoga, Pilates, aerobics, things like that, and a range of therapeutic and wellness businesses like spas and licensed massage therapy. So, how did these rules come about in the first place, and why are PCEs regulated differently from pretty much every other local retail and service use? So during the 1970s, in response to concerns about commercial sex within, quote unquote, massage parlors or health clubs, the special permit was created that requires most health and fitness related businesses to first undergo a criminal background check from the Department of Investigations before receiving approval to operate. And at the time this was created, New York didn't have the wide range of commercial gyms that we're all now very familiar with. Gyms were sort of this niche activity, whereas now they're ubiquitous and millions of us go to gyms and spas, on a regular basis. There were some large nonprofit health clubs like the Y and community centers that offered exercise classes, but it was really never anticipated that thousands of overwhelmingly legitimate businesses would need to get special permission to operate. Obviously, things have changed a lot in the 40 plus years since the special permit was created. For one, there's been significant growth in the health and fitness industry and the desire for communities to access these amenities. And we found that these businesses are overwhelmingly very legitimate and valued by the communities in which they're located. And regulations around massage therapy have changed significantly. Massage therapists are licensed health professionals by the New York State Education Department, and a registry of all licensed massage therapists is available online. But like I mentioned, these businesses continue to be uniquely regulated, placing significant burdens on small businesses. And the special permit typically takes, at least 6 months to be granted, sometimes, 9, 10, a year or more. And often costs between $30,000 and $50,000 in fees to architects and attorneys and city planning to go through that process. The BSA to go through that process. And in addition, the special permit is again not applicable in most C1 districts, meaning gyms and spas are not allowed in locations where we allow retail and commercial uses like restaurants and laundromats and grocery stores and all these things that people use on a daily basis. And finally, at a time when vacancy rates are really high along some retail streets, we want to ensure that our zoning regulations allow for a greater diversity of businesses to occupy these storefronts, which in turn helps activate corridors and makes them safer and more vibrant. I'm going to skip this one for now. And this proposal is really consistent with recommendations from a lot of the major strategic plans that the city's developed over the past several years, including One NYC and the Small Business First reports. And over the past decade, the special permit requirements have largely been removed as part of neighborhood-wide rezonings. And so this proposal is really just expanding this policy citywide. And as we've seen, businesses in the health and fitness sector have been severely impacted by the pandemic, with many reducing staff or closing either temporarily or permanently. So we found that between 2019 and 2020, during the heart of the pandemic, employment in this industry dropped by more than 60%. So as the industry continues to recover, we just want to make sure that zoning doesn't pose excessive barriers that prevent businesses from being able to meet growing demand. So what exactly are we proposing? So DCP is proposing to remove the BSA special permit for all gyms, spas, and licensed massage therapy studios. So the BSA special permit process will go away entirely. Gyms and spas would be considered commercial uses that would be allowed as of right. Smaller gyms and spas, meaning those that are less than 10,000 square feet in floor area, would be classified in the zoning resolution as a use group 6 use and allowed in all commercial and manufacturing districts, including C1 districts where gyms are currently not allowed under any circumstances. Gyms and spas over 10,000 square feet would be classified as a use group 9 use and would be slightly more limited in geography. So C2 commercial districts and higher and all manufacturing districts. They would also be allowed in the highest density C1 districts, C18 and C19. And I don't think any of those are mapped in CB4. And this distinction between uses smaller than 10,000 square feet and those larger than 10,000 square feet is consistent with the way a lot of other commercial uses are treated within zoning, like boutiques versus department stores. Licensed massage therapy will be treated in the same way as other outpatient medical uses in zoning and would be categorized as either a use group for ambulatory healthcare use, which is a community facility use, or a use group 6 healthcare office, which is a commercial use. This will allow licensed massage therapy as community facilities in most residence districts as well, in addition to commercial and manufacturing districts. And although we've heard, some really positive responses from the community in support of this proposal, sometimes when reviewing BSA applications, it does raise the issue of possible nuisances such as noise and vibration from gyms, and the BSA occasionally does impose conditions on permits. So to continue to address these concerns, the proposal will include additional performance standards for noise and vibration. And performance standards are, a very common mechanism that are used primarily in manufacturing districts to make sure that things like noise and vibration and fumes and radiation and things like that are kept under a maximum threshold. A subset of higher impact gyms will need to have an acoustical engineer certify with the Department of Buildings prior to obtaining a certificate of occupancy that facility is designed to meet those performance standards. Lower impact facilities like yoga and floor Pilates and therapeutic services will not need to demonstrate compliance with these performance standards, but everything will still be subject to the New York City noise code. So how will this impact Community Board 4? So on this map, which is just looking at gyms and spas under 10,000 square feet, the areas in orange or peach or whatever that is, are districts where a BSA special permit is currently required, and where under this proposal, gyms and spas under 10,000 square feet will be allowed as of right. And in purple, you have districts where gyms and spas, PCEs, are currently not allowed under any circumstances. They can't even apply for the special permit, and they will be allowed as of right there as well. So, really huge swaths of the community district. And on this map, we're looking at gyms and spas of unlimited size and where they will be allowed as of right. And so really the only distinction between this map and the previous map is that gyms and spas over 10,000 square feet won't be allowed in those C1 commercial overlays and or in C16 or C17 base districts. Licensed massage on this map will be allowed, is where licensed massage therapy will be allowed as of right, which is, you can see is pretty much everywhere. Again, licensed massage therapy will be regulated in the same way as a community facility use, like a ambulatory outpatient medical facility or a doctor's office or something like that. So the application was certified on May 19th. The community boards have until July 27th to submit your recommendation. We're tentatively scheduled for a public hearing in August and a likely vote in early fall. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Can you go back to slide 14 for a second, Andy? So can you describe to us what those areas in white are, will not be allowed? Because I'm trying to picture what those are. What streets and what's in there now?
So what's in there now are, those are primarily our districts, residence districts.
Okay, so that's the residential areas, right? Okay, all right, that makes sense. Thanks. I'm going to go to Brad, then Hector, then Betty, then Twee.
Thanks, Paul.
Just as a reminder to everybody, again, procedure is committee asks clarification questions, then we'll go to public for questions, comments, and then we'll come back to the committee for conversation and vote. So Brad.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Andrew. In our preliminary meetings that you held prior to this meeting, we discussed some of the issues that you have now added as the vibration, the sound. But one thing that we always come up against is the assembly outside of the gyms. And I think that should be added to that list. Sometimes they do boot camps. They mobilize on the sidewalk. We've had a lot of complaints of children trying to get by, nannies trying to get by, and they take up the sidewalk area. So I'd like to add that to part of the criteria to move forward. And I would also say to the board and the new members, the biggest issue we had, and why I'm glad this is happening, would the gyms and spas would be built. 6-7 months they're in there, sometimes over a year. Then they would come to us for this BSA sign off. And it was a real waste. And we had no impact at that point. So I'm glad for these establishments to be able to open up in further areas, but I just think the current system was not working. So I'm glad that it's being changed. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Hector, you're next.
Thank you for the presentation, very detailed. Two things. As far as opening up gyms in these certain areas, I know an issue has always been with, I really don't understand how the criteria is for when the gyms open up and soundproofing and noise complaints, that sort of thing. Because some of these classes get a little loud, they're throwing around them, weights and stuff. It gets really obnoxious in certain areas. And I see that the white areas are supposed to be residential, but obviously there's a mix in some of the other areas as well. I don't think that map is completely reflecting what the community really is. It's kind of a mix of both. So I have a question about that. What is to say that there's somebody going to go in there and make sure that these new facilities are opened up with the proper, I guess, soundproofing or speaking out of community comments on acceptance. I mean, they'll run through us, obviously, but who's to say? Because this could open up the floodgates to obviously other issues, like which leads to my second question: medical massage. Now we all know that medical massage can be abused in other ways. Obviously, one official person can get licensed and or use their license illegally in different ways, and then we have literally a I hate to say it, but prostitution in the neighborhood, possibly, or other unsavory kind of activities in some of these facilities. How do we know that that's not going to occur? And because basically we're turning into a massage parlor, a sleazy massage parlor is what we may end up with in some of our communities, which we definitely don't want. So, and all it takes is, honestly, from what I understand, all it takes is one person to get the medical massage license or use it. And I believe they get paid a lot of money for that use until they get caught. And then it gets revoked, and then they'll move on to the next person and get another license to start the cycle all over again. So it's a way to skirt the law from what I've read. And what do we do to ensure that that doesn't happen when you do these rezoning changes?
If it's okay with the chairs, I would prefer to respond to comments as I get them. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great, thanks. To your first comment about the orange area is not really accurately reflecting the character of the neighborhoods. That's a point well taken. Obviously there's a lot of mix of uses within these areas and a mix of uses within buildings themselves. So these are not strictly commercial or manufacturing areas, but they are either commercial manufacturing zoning districts where under this proposal and even under the current regime, gyms and spas would be allowed with a special permit, and with the proposed regulations, the thinking is that the performance standards would mitigate those nuisances from noise and vibration, and the specific mechanism would be that before an operator goes to obtain their certificate of occupancy by the DOB, they have to get a licensed acoustical engineer in there to ensure that noise and vibration do not exceed a maximum threshold. And until they do that, DOB will not issue them a certificate of occupancy. Your second question related to the possibility of massage parlors popping up. I think like I mentioned, licensed massage therapy is highly regulated by the Department of Education, and non-licensed massage therapy will continue to be specifically disallowed in the zoning. So there's a civil remedy in addition to a criminal remedy, or a criminal remedy, because prostitution is still illegal. So there, sort of those two avenues for redress.
I understand, if I may respond to that. As I mentioned earlier, the way they skirt this is basically they just get one individual who is licensed, and they'll go to the trouble. I mean, we're talking about criminal rings, criminal activity here. And it's pretty well organized. It's rampant in other states, obviously, and even in New York, where basically you have gangs and illegal criminal syndicates that run these massage parlors. And they use one individual to get the license. They pay for a school and everything. And basically they have the license right there. And that allows them to have a legally open business. And
Hector,
yet it will be misused. Yeah.
Yeah, Hector, I think your point is right, that it should be that anybody practicing within the facility should be licensed, not just one license for the facility. And maybe that's the solution we can look at. And I don't know if that's something that's worth considering. Betty, you were next, and then Twee. Betty, you're still muted.
I'm just a little slow on the trigger. Two questions. I don't really understand. Could you clarify the higher impact gyms need additional performance requirements and documentation? I don't understand if I'm filing for my gym. Does DOB, how is it determined? What characteristics? Is it just size, or is it the is it the activity in the gym?
Right. So there's not a, as I understand it, not a specific threshold, but in general, you know, things like dropping lots of weights, lots of machines operating at the same time, those would be considered higher impact. I
know that would be higher impact, but suppose I'm filing for my gym, and believe me, we've had painful experience on this. What if I mean, is there a question to DOB? Are you going to drop weights? Are you going to have loud music? How revealing does the applicant have to be?
Right. I think that's a really point well taken. I will get back to our team who's developing this proposal and get an answer back to you about the specific threshold.
Okay.
Yeah. So Andy, if I may, and Betty, just to kind of put a little color to it. So our proposal team here did work with BSA and a group of licensed acoustical engineers to create the standards that will apply to all gyms in mixed-use buildings. We'll get back to you on exactly, what kind of certification and application, requirement to that a gym operator will need to submit to DOB, but our understanding is basically anything with significant weights or exercise machines will need to comply. So the exception will be like yoga and spas and other low impact activities.
Okay, so you'll get back hopefully to us fairly soon so we can write our letter clearly to city planning, because this is a really important issue for us. I guess that this is only going to be required for a building, or no, it's for buildings where there's commercial and residential above the facility, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And not to dwell on it. Other question, which is much easier, I'm sure. We have in Chelsea a lot of martial arts facilities popping up. Do they fall under any of this? Martial arts.
Right. So martial arts studios would be considered, a health and fitness related facility in the same way that, a gym or a spa. So, it's depending on the size of the studio will determine where it's allowed.
Okay.
But it's all under the same umbrella as a, gym or spa, things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Twee, and then we'll go to Brad. Twee.
Okay, so I don't think any of us received this particular presentation. There was a couple of slides that I wanted to address. One of them was the particular areas that already removed these particular PCEs. One of them I noticed was Governor Island, which surprised me. Maybe that's in relation to the fact that they're going to do what they're going to do. I don't know where Jerome Corridor is. I don't know where Stapleton Waterfront is, but it does seem to be within all of New York City. But I'd like to address head on Hector's concern, because in reading this, it read to me, what jumped out was a couple of things. And what we did receive, which was 21 DCP 8183Y as the title of the document, which is 101 pages. Page 23 of 101 has graphs about, the number of establishments and the employment that happened and didn't happen. Whereas in the text, they talk about how it dropped in 2020, but it's not reflected here. These graphs only go to 2019. So it doesn't really reflect what really happened visually. But on page 24, the PCE special permit has not been effective at limiting the commercial sex industry within businesses offering unlicensed illegal massage. For example, commercial sex, and in some cases, human trafficking. And that's because they're either without that special permits, they're either unaware or intentionally in violation. So I didn't know, or intentionally, well, we don't have to do a permit anyway. City only becomes aware if there are complaints. So unless someone decides to make the complaint to 311, it could just very well be that this is the massage parlor in our neighborhood. Maybe there are neighborhoods that want it. the proposed action would not affect the operation of businesses offering unlicensed illegal massage services. So I was taken aback by that. And it doesn't seem to be the right solution to say, well, if sex parlors are not going to go through permits, let's not give permits to anybody. Let's just have no permits, just take away that permit requirements as is proposed here, it seems. I've tried to raise my hand after the other people been on here longer than I have, because it does seem that the process is quite circuitous and nebulous. It takes 6 months. It could be up to $50,000 is what the text says. In the presentation, he says maybe 9 to 12 months and, $30,000 to $50,000. What about more transparency? I mean, and then also the fees go to architects, attorneys, and then also city planning. So it does seem as though some of the fees go to the city. I know there's a federal bailout or whatever, but if the city's hurting, you would think that you would want more transparency, at least reduce fees so that there can be something that's more visible to everybody. And that way you don't just, forego all of that. That's my biggest concern here. With regards to what Betty said about martial arts, they didn't mention that in the text. They mentioned barre and then Pilates as ones that sort of overlap different zonings. So the fact that it's all sort of nebulous is something that could be unnebulous. Say, have the city still preserve those fees. I don't know how, I don't like the fact that they're like, oh, it's here and we'll just get rid of it for everybody. Thank you. Also, it's in the Q&A.
Okay. Thank you for all those questions. I'm going to try and respond to as many as possible. To where they're allowed without a BSA special permit currently, I did put up this slide briefly, and they're usually in special districts. So none of these are in Community Board 4, even though Community Board 4 does have some special districts, special Clinton district, special West Chelsea, special Midtown. None of those allow PCEs as of right. They predate when DCP started this new policy of having PCEs as of right. So East Harlem, obviously East Harlem, Coney Island, Inwood is in Upper Manhattan, Jerome Corridor is in the Bronx. So these are all, recent neighborhood-wide rezonings within the past, I would say 10, 12, 15 years at the most. To your main point, and in response to, I think, which was also Hector's question, I think what you're referring to, what you're reading off of, is the environmental impact statement or the environmental assessment statement. I'm not quite sure which one was produced for this particular proposal, but I think the argument that the environmental documents are trying to make is that the current regime, the BSA special permit, did nothing to stem or wasn't as effective in stemming the proliferation of illegal PCEs, because if someone really wanted to open a massage parlor, a special permit is not going to get in their way. And I think this proposal sort of recognizes that it's difficult to regulate crime because that's what crime is. You can't regulate it. And I think that's sort of what that text was actually trying to get through. What else? What did I miss?
It doesn't seem to be the solution that you just forego it for everybody. If you go to the other slides where you make everything into purple, I think it's after slide 14 where I think it's after what Paul had said, this one here, there will be allowed, but currently not allowed for licensed massage. So that to me is like, okay, so someone in their apartment can have a licensed massage parlor without having these permits. That doesn't make any sense. And that's within this district.
Right. So the permit, the BSA special permit, is different from being a regulated licensed massage therapist. In order to operate, you would still need to be a licensed massage therapist under the state regulations. So that would not change.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here for 1 second. I think that these are really legitimate concerns and we've heard, in different communities as well. I think what Andy is trying to say is that, and I think it is recognized by others in this virtual meeting room, is that, zoning may not be the tool that would make a lot of difference in terms of illegal, commercial sex and illegal activities. We do see that as a legitimate concern. Throughout this proposal development process, we worked with the mayor's office of special enforcement to make sure that we aren't in any way changing or weakening the enforcement of businesses offering unlicensed massage or encouraging in commercial sex. So we made it clear that these types of businesses are not at all allowed anywhere in New York City and can be shut down by DOB and or the Office of Special Enforcement. So, that may not be satisfactory, but I just want to make it clear that zoning is not necessarily the end all be all of regulating activities like this. But totally hear your concern.
Thanks, Sylvia. Marty?
That answer, thank you, goes right to the question that I wanted to ask. I'll make a statement. There's a hell of a lot of information to digest here. We picked up a couple of sentences that I also reacted to, and I am no way, and I think we are not experts in this amount of information that is going to modify some zoning. Anyway, my questions have to do with enforcement. And I just heard you say that's not your wheelhouse. Nevertheless, I think our letter does need to say something about enforcement in two realms: the sex worker realm and the noise realm. When an establishment is established that turns out to be noisy, as Betty alluded to already, we have experienced some of that on this committee. What is the enforcement? How do we get the enforcement for things that go beyond the zoning? And what kind of assurances do we have that the establishment of these facilities will not interfere with our community? I think enforcement is very key. Even though, Sylvia, you just said it's not something that you do, it's very key to this. And if we don't say something about enforcement in our letter, I think we're making a mistake.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. So from the public, we do have a comment. I think that we've already been pretty well discussing this, so I don't know if we need to go into much further, which is how will the government check to make certain that massage places have all licensed therapists, especially since the DA changed the law saying that sex work will not be prosecuted. There might be more businesses springing up. Sometimes the owners have one license, but everyone else is not licensed. Then those other workers do the sex work. And this is coming from someone who is Helen Wan, who is a licensed massage therapist. So Sylvia and Andy, clearly there's some remaining concern. And if we can find some language to put into the zoning text amendment such that we restrict that, perhaps massage places need to have everyone licensed who's a practitioner or something like that. All right. Anybody else have any other comments? Or, I mean, Christine, did I see your hand go up?
That's me.
Oh, that's you, Viren. Sorry, Viren?
No, just a very quick question. I'm going back to Marty's question. Who is going to be actually taking care of enforcement? Is it DOB or is it a combination of agencies? Can you sort of address that?
Right. So DOB will be the agency that's going to be responsible for at the front end, making sure that the gyms are going to be compliant with the zoning. When it comes to, making a complaint or enforcing, a complaint after the fact for noise or vibration or something similar, those like 311 complaints usually go to, Sylvia, correct me if I'm wrong, or they're DEP or DOB, depending on the type of violation or potential violation.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is, and we can get more details later, is, any compliance issues, building code issues would be enforced by DOB, as with other type of, zoning building code issues. So this includes the noise compliance and vibration compliance we were talking about. I think if it's, beyond zoning and what DOB's purview is, we know that the Office of Special Enforcement would also be playing a role, and we can get additional details on, how the Division of Labor is organized.
So my question was more about permitting and licensing violations and non-compliance post-occupancy.
You mean the licensing of health professionals?
Well, there could, if the facility is used not for the purpose for which it's been permitted, that is the community's concern, pretty much, right? I mean, beyond everything that the DOB is going to do in terms of checks and balances, what if scenario where a facility actually begins to become a nuisance of some sort? Is it simply NYPD kind of complaint, or is there a regulating body similar to like restaurants, right? They are periodically inspected and whatnot. Is there any such mechanism that you could ask for if it doesn't exist, or if it does exist, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, let us get back to you on the details. I think one recourse that is typical is 311, and it will be complaints, and it will be directed to the appropriate agency for enforcement. So sometimes it's PD, sometimes it's DOB, sometimes it's other relevant agencies, but we'll get more details.
Can I just jump in real quick, Paul, to answer Varen's question? Historically, to be honest with you, our district has a number of illegal massage parlors in our area, and it used to be a very rampant thing, and so it is an NYPD, it is a special enforcement, and it is a state licensing, education license thing. So between those three, I think is really where you find it. It's never really been a Department of City Planning, and rarely a DOB issue. It's really special enforcement.
Got it. Thanks, Jesse. So there would be some sort of language put in place to make sure that that continues to happen as part of the text amendment. That's all I'm suggesting.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like there's a pretty clear consensus that we want to manage sex workers and make sure that there is some enforcement against those activities. So we'll include some language in the letter to that effect. We want to make sure that we reinforce our regular concerns about sound issues at any of these PCEs and how that comes together. And the other issue that came up that hasn't got much legs, but we'll put it into the letter, is about outdoor assemblage of patrons and blocking sidewalks and things like that. So we want to have something in there about that as well. For those three major points, which will clearly be sussed out a bit more detail in a letter, can I have a motion to accept a letter to support the zoning text amendment given these stipulations? Marty makes that motion. Can I have a second? You know what, Andy, can you do me a favor and can you stop share screen so that I can get a bigger gallery view? Thanks, appreciate it. Second, I saw Aaron. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mike Noble, Kara Keenan, and Twee, I don't have your screens up, so if you're going to vote. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining?
Sorry, it's Carrie. I'm an aye.
You're an aye. Thank you, Carrie. Anybody abstain? Twee?
Oh, no, I was aye. I didn't know you
You're
didn't
an
see
aye.
me.
Okay. Abstaining? Present, not eligible. Okay, we have a unanimous passage on that.
Paul?
And it's, yes, Betty. Yes,
I
Betty.
just wanted to have something sounds funny. Suggestion that there were 2 topics that city planning was going to get back to us on. We could put that in the letter.
Yeah, do we want city planning to get back to us before we write the letter?
Well, that would be good.
We
You know,
we can get answers back to you
Okay,
in
great.
very short order. The first, just to be clear, the first one was your question related to what's the specific threshold between high impact and low impact, and what happens when you go to DOB and you say, I'm a low impact, and what do you have to prove to do so?
That's perfect.
And the second set
And
of
the other
questions
one
had to do with the enforcement
enforcement?
mechanism for each of the possible
Perfect.
nuisances
Okay.
and what's the division of labor
Okay.
between each.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So this week would be good. Thank you.
We can definitely do that.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks. I appreciate it. Oh, wait, Bert has his hand up.
Yeah, I think we also have a process issue here as well. Our full board meeting is the 28th. I think city planning said they wanted responses from the community by the 27th. So we might also have to go the route of executive and ratification.
I thought they said the hearing was in August, the timeline for this.
No, public is August, but the
okay.
this is about
So
July
let me,
27th.
hey, Tweed, let me have Andy or Sylvia answer. Have them.
Yeah, so the July 27th. Sorry, let me bring up my presentation again.
So our comments have to be into you by July 27th.
Recommendations.
Right, it's July 27th.
Then we do have to do it by exec.
All right, thank you, Bert. I appreciate pointing that out. Great. All right. Thank you, everybody. Sylvia and Andy, thank you very much for your time. I know you're doing a lot of these across the city. So another, we put you ahead of our lengthy item that we have tonight. So you get to go home early.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. And I am going to pass the gavel. I've done too much tonight.
Okay. So our next item is more complicated, although small ones can be complicated as well. We've got the Starrett-Lehigh and the Terminal Warehouse rezoning application. This is our last item for the agenda. It's an application for 2 blocks between West 26th and West 28th Street, 11th and 12th Avenues. And they're both in the West Chelsea Historic District. The Starrett-Lehigh building was designated a New York City landmark, individual landmark in 1986. The application, I'm doing this very, very quickly. The application tonight is for 2 major actions: the zoning map amendment to include the 2 blocks in the special West Chelsea district by creating a new sub-area with modified zoning text. And number 2, rezoning the project area from M23 to M24. You should know that Community Board 4 has advocated for years that the special West Chelsea district should be expanded to include the Starrett-Lehigh and the Terminal Warehouse blocks, and that the current zoning be replaced by M24 with an FAR of 5. We feel that these blocks are important to the integrity of West Chelsea. You may recall that last January, we commented on the draft scope for a targeted environmental impact statement for this project in a 6-page letter with specific recommendations, and that's in Dropbox. After the applicant's presentation, we'll have committee questions as usual, then the public's, followed by our discussion and vote. Number of issues were previously identified in that 6-page letter that I just mentioned. So I think there's a whole team from the applicants, so perhaps you can start introducing yourselves. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Caroline Harris from Goldman Harris. And we represent one of the two applicants, RXR. And I'm very happy to be at this milestone in the application process. We've enjoyed very much speaking with the community board's West Chelsea Land Use Committee over several years to refine the proposal. And we're here now after having been certified. I'd like to introduce, and thank you, and we thank you very much for the time that you've given to the project already, and then again for tonight. Hopefully, this won't necessarily be a longer part of the meeting than the last item that was on the agenda that was supposed to be short. So I'd like to introduce the rest of my team. First of all, Eric Schlemus is Senior Vice President of Design and Major Projects at RXR Construction Services. RXR owns the Starrett-Lehigh building. Andrew Staniforth, maybe people wave. Andrew Staniforth is a Principal and Senior Vice President of L&L Holdings, which is one of the two owners of the terminal warehouse along with Columbia. Allison Ruddick is here with us. She's the leader of environmental services, our project manager from VHB Environmental Consulting Firm. Elise Wagner, my co-counsel on this project from Kramer, partner at Kramer Levin, and she represents L&L Columbia. So we have a PowerPoint presentation, and in the first instance, I'd like to turn it over to Eric and Andrew to describe their respective buildings and what their vision is for this district, new extension of the West Chelsea district, and for their buildings. So who's first, Andrew?
Sure,
Oh,
I
we
can
need
go
our
first.
Slide presentation.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
We need our presentation, Gio. Giovanni Gioia probably won't say very much, but he should, but he's our handling our PowerPoint presentation right now. There we go. Gio, 2 down. There you go. All right.
You want me to go first, Andrew?
Yeah, since you're on the left.
Since I'm on the left. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for seeing us again. I'll be quick because you guys are all very familiar with the property. So Starrett-Lehigh building, 2.3 million square foot building, West Chelsea Historic District, also an individual landmark. For RXR, it's been a labor of love to maintain and renovate this building, keep it up to date with emerging and changing trends, and make it relevant to the community. As you know, the buildings, both buildings sit very strategically between Hudson Yards to the north, Chelsea to the west, to the east, Hudson River Park to the west, and Meatpacking District to the south. And these buildings are really kind of at the crux of all those important, vibrant neighborhoods. And our goals have always been to keep these buildings relevant to those expansions that are happening around us and bring some vibrancy to the West Chelsea neighborhood, as been evidenced by the residential buildings that have gone up around these two properties, and also evidenced by the investment that both firms have made into these properties. So I think just, generally speaking, Starrett-Lehigh is a building that's occupied by tenants in the, what we call the creative class, Martha Stewart, Polo Ralph Lauren, several studios, several design firms, tenants all that are mostly in the business of creating. So it really complements the tenancy in Terminal Warehouse and other buildings around the neighborhood. Our goal also is obviously to keep in keeping these buildings relevant is to make sure there's a variety of uses that are occupied in the building. And our activation of the ground floor has been really paramount to that. Installing retail, food hall. We have a Marcus Samuelson led restaurant that will be opening up early next year. All these things on the ground floor of the building are really meant to enhance not only the tenants in the building and provide accompaniment to their day-to-day life and their work-life balance, but also to really provide facilities to the community that surround us. And that is also evident in some artist relationships that we formed and some exhibits that will be happening in the building over the next couple of months into next year. We also are really focused on the building's impact to the commuter experience. Lots of plans about bike facilities in the building, and really kind of being able to curate a very large variety of modals of transportation to get to the building. Now that the 7th line is stopping at Hudson Yards, it's a very quick walk from there. Again, plans for ample bike storage in the building, as well as, there is a small amount of vehicle parking in the building. So I think that's generally, what we're trying to achieve here, and a little bit of the history and the impact of the building. So Andrew, your turn.
Yeah, I think I just want to echo a lot of the sort of sentiment that Eric relayed about Starrett-Lehigh. And I think we share a lot of that. And I think together we're going to create something really interesting in this part of the city. And over the course of the last few years, right, we've had a chance to study the terminal warehouse building, study all of the different iterations it's had over the last 130 years, look at really the detailed aspects like the shutters, or whether or not to restore the parapets at this time, really diving into the different areas of this building and coming up with a scheme that transforms this building that was built to store furs and grain coming from the West, and turning it into something that matches a 21st century workplace. In part of that, we're very cognizant of the fact that when you create a workplace, especially in a building with this large of a footprint, you have to activate the ground floor, right? You have to have things on the ground floor that integrate with the community. And that's one of the largest reasons that we're here talking to you guys and going through with this zoning action, is really to create a vibrancy and variety on that ground floor that allows this building to tie in nicely with the community and serve as this connector between Chelsea in the south, the two parks, right? We have Hudson River Park on the west, the High Line on the east, and then up and down connecting the new Hudson Yards. And these two buildings serve as a really nice anchor, both the sort of the neighborhoods from a physical and location perspective, but also from sort of an anchor of these large architectural buildings that are in the landmark district, and they will remain these icons of history. So as we go through this presentation, it really is that spirit of trying to integrate into the community, bringing people in, and activating these two buildings in a way that we haven't been able to do until right now.
I'll turn this presentation over to Elise, who's going to describe the current conditions, and then I'll come back on to explain our proposal.
I apologize for the delay. Couldn't get my cursor in the right place. Hi, I'm Elise Wagner. As Carrie said, I'm representing the terminal warehouse, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the existing conditions in the area of these two properties. So here we have the existing zoning map. If you look at the circle there, the properties are right in the middle of the circle. The existing zoning is M23, which is a low density manufacturing district that allows manufacturing uses and some certain commercial uses, but not a broad range of commercial and retail uses. As you see, the special West Chelsea district is just to the east of our buildings, and that's relevant because, as we'll discuss later, we are going to include these buildings in the West Chelsea district as part of this application. Next slide. This shows you the wide range of uses, existing uses in the area. It's a truly mixed use area. There are many commercial and office uses. There also are some manufacturing uses, quite a number of residential uses, and residential uses with mixed with commercial on the ground floor, as well as some utility and other types of infrastructure uses. Next slide. So as has been mentioned already, this area, it's really quite strategic. It's really a transitional area with West Chelsea to the east and the High Line to the east. To the north, you have the northern part of the High Line, as well as Hudson Yards, and the west, Hudson River Park. So really, really creating a vibrant district composed of these two buildings will really do a lot to connect these buildings not only to each other, but to what is going on in the city around them. Next slide. As I'm sure you all know, there have been quite a number of commercial buildings built in the area, and the green are recently completed residential buildings. There are also some other buildings that are in construction or planned, and that's there's the one you see in the yellow. So that will relate to the types of commercial and retail uses that are contemplated for these two buildings. Next slide. And as you all know, both of these buildings are in the West Chelsea Historic District. That's the tan that you see on the screen now. And as has been mentioned, the Starrett-Lehigh building is also an individual landmark. And now back to Carrie for a discussion of this proposal.
Thank you, Elise. So as the clients explained, the objective of the applications is to propose a rezoning that facilitates a broader range of uses in their buildings and prepare the buildings for the next generation of the city's economy, enabling flexibility to support the future of manufacturing and retailing and the changing office workplace, in addition to the planning goals they mentioned of making a more coherent West Side and a better, stronger relationship between West Chelsea and these properties and then the Hudson River Park. So accordingly, we're proposing to amend the zoning map to extend the special West Chelsea district to the west and to create a new sub-area K. We're going to amend the zoning text to modify the certain use, loading, and signage requirements that are now applicable in the M2 district, and to rezone the project area from M23 to M24. Next slide, please. So as you can see on the zoning map, on the left side, we've circled in red the two blocks, and that it would become an M24 district, and on the West Chelsea sub-district, I'm sorry, the special West Chelsea district, we've added the sub-area K to the west of the existing West Chelsea special district. And we can move on from there. So as an overview of the text amendment, we're proposing to expand the as of right uses for a portion of each of the buildings to include all uses that are permitted in a C63 district, which is nearby, with some very important restrictions. We're not allowing any residential, any hotels, or any other sleeping accommodations, while we are retaining all of the M2 uses. So this zoning change is not intended to push out any manufacturing that might be, that is allowed, and groups that might want to locate in this building, but we're supplementing that. And then we have some minor modification of the signage regulations and the loading regulations. The zoning text amendment relating to use would now include, as in the C6 districts, C63 districts, all use group 3 and 4, except as I said, those with sleeping accommodations. So you might think about, well, for example, it would be allow academic institutions or medical office use in use group 3 and 4. In use group 6A, certain use group 6A uses, when they're located in an M2 district, are not allowed at all, and others are limited to their size, only in the M2 district. So we're eliminating those limitations that are only applicable in the M2 and making the more general list of use group 6A uses allowed, which would allow food stores like a supermarket, as an example. We're allowing all use groups 6C, 9A, and 12B, and this would involve allowing bookstores, a clothing shop, and other retail uses that you would normally find in a commercial district. That, for example, is important because at least in the Starrett-Lehigh building, historically, there have been clothing designers and manufacturers, but once they manufacture their product, they can't show the product in a store, even in the ground floor of the building. So this would allow for more continuity for potential uses in the upper floors that it might be manufacturing or commercial or R&D to be able to show their products in the other floors of the building, for example, on the ground floor. And we're allowing certain use group 10A, today certain, use group 10A uses are not allowed. And here they would be allowed with restrictions on the total area that could be occupied in the building. So an example of use group 10A is a department store. Generally, you could consider use group 10A stores that are larger than 10,000 square feet, a select number of stores larger than 10,000 square feet. This will allow a more dynamic mix of uses, not just for retail, but in the whole building, and make it a more vital member of the broader community. Within that zoning text amendment relating to the uses, this is a breakdown of the floor area and the percentage of the floor area in the building that would be allowed for these use group K uses. Mind you, any use that's allowed in the M24 district as of right would not be limited by these percentages. It's only the new uses that otherwise wouldn't be allowed in the M2 district that we're putting these caps on. So overall, the cap on the conversion would be 25% in each building. And specifically with regard to use group 10A uses, the limit would be 15% of the floor area in the building. So I know earlier Eric referred to 2.3 million square feet of rentable square feet in the Starrett-Lehigh building. I'm a zoning lawyer, but I know people who do renting really like to count the square footage in a building differently. I think they get more rent for that. But here, this gross square footage of the building is a very particular number, as is zoning floor area particular number. And it's the number that's used in environmental review to assess the impacts of the project. I just want to explain also that some questions came up when we had been presenting this project to the community board earlier, to the leadership and just to the committee. We want to explain that Starrett-Lehigh building, at least before COVID, was nearly 100% leased. And there's no immediate plan to use the use group 10A uses. Terminal warehouse is mostly vacant. They're just beginning to work through their lease up. Andrew can speak to the question of, in the first phase of his lease up, is he expecting to use either 285,000 square feet, 285,000 square feet for the converted uses, or more particularly about 170,000 square feet for use group 10A uses. But the purpose of this rezoning isn't to plan a tenancies for the immediate future. The plan here is to have flexibility for the long term. So while Starrett-Lehigh has no intention of vacating multiple floors in the building right now and jumping into the full amount of use group 10A uses that might be allowed by this zoning change, it wants that flexibility for the long term. As we've all experienced, both before COVID, the nature of retail was changing substantially. The internet retail was having a big impact on bricks and mortar retail. And then in COVID, we even saw bigger change in the way retail was being conducted. We don't know what the future has. And so both clients want to establish these percentages in order to have flexibility over the long term. Now, we do also know that the community board is interested in having a local feel, having local businesses, retail and otherwise, in the buildings, and not to have the buildings overwhelmed by these large department stores larger than 10,000 square feet. Both parties, both applicants share that vision. They want to encourage local retail, and they are directing their leasing brokers to reach out to local businesses and to try to bring local businesses into the building. So we could go on to the next slide. Another feature of this text amendment is to allow unenclosed sidewalk cafes on 27th Street. Now, right now in West Chelsea regulations, sidewalk cafes are allowed on the avenues, on the wide street. But because of the planning vision that the clients have for these two buildings, they want to activate 27th Street. They want to create a real excitement and vibe on West 27th Street. So people will be drawn to 27th Street for restaurants and for enjoyment, outdoor activity, and meeting. Something that's particularly now we're even more sensitive to since COVID, how important it is to an economy and to a neighborhood to be able to have outdoor cafes. So we've proposed here additional sidewalk cafe locations on West 27th Street, in addition to the West Chelsea's current sidewalk cafe standards, which have the cafes allowed on the avenues. Now, just today, city planning certified a proposal to basically eliminate the process for getting sidewalk cafes under the current zoning. And because we just heard that ourselves, we will be discussing with city planning if that amendment gets approved, how it impacts this proposal, and might well mean that this aspect of our proposed text amendment is no longer necessary. So loading regulations. In the proposal we have that we've requested, we don't want to have to include new loading berths when there's a change of use. In the current zoning resolution, generally speaking, when there's a change of use in a building or a conversion, you have to add loading berths if on the net basis, more loading berths would be required. But knowing full well how sensitive the community is to having more loading berths, we didn't want to have to put more loading berths in the building. Moreover, since the two buildings are historic, it would be very difficult to add them after the building is built. And in the case of Terminal Warehouse, after the alterations that have been proposed and have been accepted and are in process, it would be very difficult to retrofit the building again in order to have more loading if the change of use in today's zoning resolution would require more loading to be added. So our text amendment eliminates the need for new loading berths in the case of a change of use. So we can move forward. I know there's an issue about loading, but we will get to the more general issue about loading on the corner of 12th and 26th later on. It's not part of the text amendment. So another very small piece of the text amendment has to do with signage, and it's about signage, particularly on the chamfered corners of the Starrett-Lehigh building. The way the text is written, it would apply to the Terminal Warehouse also, but because the Terminal Warehouse doesn't have chamfered corners, this text amendment really only affects the Starrett-Lehigh building. And ultimate purpose of the text amendment is to take this sign, if you see the historic sign on the corner, that sign's location and placement would not be allowed under today's zoning. And so the purpose of the text amendment is to enable that position of a sign. We're not proposing that sign. We're just giving it to you as an example. The text amendment would allow, in effect, a sign to be put on the chamfered corner, always subject to Landmark Preservation Commission review. So we're just opening up the zoning issue that might prevent a sign. We know we still have to go back to landmarks. In addition, on the same corner, we're seeking a change in the height of illuminated signage. Currently, it's limited to 58 feet. And what we're proposing is to allow illuminated signs at 75 feet, which is the same height as non-illuminated signs and indirectly illuminated signs located within 500 feet of a district boundary. So if you see where that purple line is on the left, that distance allows for non-illuminated and indirectly illuminated signs at 75 feet, and we'd like to extend that to the corner where the chamfered corner is. The reason for this in large part is because of the visibility of the signs from the High Line. What we're trying to do is establish this connection between the High Line in particular and West Chelsea to Hudson River Park, and we think the signage at the higher elevation would help make that connection. Next page. So the rezoning also, our proposed action is also a rezoning of M23 to M24. The only two items that this accomplishes for the project is that the as of right FAR would go from 2 to 5, and the height and setbacks regulations would change. Both buildings exceed the FAR limits and the base height and setback requirements. This rezoning would only help to reduce the degree of non-compliance of each building, which is helpful when it comes to insurers insuring the building and knowing how much more of the building would be allowed to be rebuilt if there were a complete damage and destruction or more than 75% of the building. And that makes it easier to get the insurance. So that's the reason for the rezoning for M23 to M24. So now we're turning to seeker review, and I'll turn this over to Allison.
Thanks, Carrie. So I am Allison Reddick. I'm with VHB, the environmental consulting firm that prepared the draft EIS on behalf of the lead agency, City Planning, and the applicants. So I'll review the draft EIS and provide a summary of the analyses that were undertaken, and then also the analysis results. I'm going to dive right into the EIS conclusions. I know that you are familiar with the draft scope of work that was published and for which you provided comments, which were incorporated into the final scope of work. And I know you're familiar also with the sort of EIS analytical framework, which looks at existing conditions, projects to a no action, and then a with action to assess those impacts. Okay, so I'll start with the EIS analyses, those impact areas for which no significant adverse impacts were identified. So this was historic and cultural resources, hazardous materials, air quality, noise, public health, and neighborhood character. There are some commitments that come out of these technical areas in the form of E-designations, and those are for hazardous materials and noise. And those are associated with the potential for community facility uses should they be future tenants of the buildings. Either one. Okay, so then the next slide, the EIS did identify the potential for significant adverse impacts in the area of transportation. So transportation analysis, looks at a whole host of different aspects that include traffic and parking, safety, pedestrians, and transit, which includes subways, the subway lines themselves, subway station elements, and buses. The EIS identified potential impacts in the areas of traffic, pedestrian elements, and transit. And so we'll get into that in a bit more detail. So next slide, traffic. The EIS conducted detailed analyses at 21 locations, 21 intersections. You can see them on the slide in this image. And it identified the potential for impacts at 9 locations in the PM peak period, 7 in the Saturday midday peak period. And then in the weekday AM and midday peaks, no significant adverse impacts were identified. So altogether, of the 21 analysis locations, there's actually 10 locations that would experience impacts between the different analysis periods. And 7 of those locations can be mitigated using signal timing modifications, which DOT has found to be feasible and implementable. 3 locations, all of which are along 10th Avenue, were identified as not being able to be mitigated. So, we also looked at both parking and safety in the EIS. These were both examined and no impacts were identified. So no parking is provided at either of the buildings. And the EIS looks at parking capacity at different off-site locations within a quarter-mile radius to see if there's sufficient capacity to accommodate demand that might come from the EIS's reasonable worst-case development scenario. And it found that there is, in fact, future availability and capacity to accommodate that demand should it be realized. The EIS also included a discussion of safety, and consistent with seeker looked at whether there are any intersections that are considered high crash intersections. Within the study area, there is one such location, but it's at a distance from the 2 buildings at 10th and 23rd. We'll talk about safety later in the presentation as it relates to loading, more specifically at the project sites. Okay, so next slide, looking at pedestrians. The EIS looked at 67 different pedestrian elements. You can see in the image here where the project area is the vast majority of activity introduced by pedestrians by the reasonable worst case development scenario is really concentrated in the direction going sort of north and south to and from the Hudson Yards West 34th Street station, and then points east going to the 23rd 8th Avenue subway station, and sort of population and sort of areas of greater activity to the east. So that's what's reflected. You can see all the analysis locations there. The concentration of pedestrian activity at the sites themselves is really located along 11th Avenue, between 11th Avenue and the building's entrances. For Starrett, that's sort of mid-block on 26th Street. And then for Terminal, it's at also mostly focused on 11th Avenue. So of those 67 pedestrian elements, impacts were identified at 2 elements in the AM and midday peak hours, 6 locations in the PM peak, and 1 in the Saturday midday peak. Mitigation is identified in the EIS, and that consists of crosswalk widenings or signal timing changes, and that could mitigate all of those impacts except at 1 location in the AM peak and 2 locations in the PM peak periods. And those locations are actually not right at the project area either. It's at the north side of West 25th Street between 8th and 9th Avenues. That's in AM and PM. And then 9th Avenue in the west side of Hudson Boulevard between West 33rd and West 34th Street. Yeah, so then for transit, like I mentioned before, considers subway lines themselves, elements at different subway stations like escalators, stairs, and fare control areas, and then also considers buses. So the EIS analyzed station elements at 34th Street, Hudson Yards Station, and then also at 8th Avenue and 23rd Street Station. The EIS was conservative in assigning people to those 2 stations and concentrating their movements at the southern end of Hudson Yards Station and at the northern end of the 23rd Street, 8th Avenue Station. Based on those assumptions, 1 impact was identified in the weekday PM period for mezzanine escalators at Hudson Yards in the down direction. The EIS, it's like it just trips the threshold for being considered an impact, and it's identified as unmitigated. no other subway impacts looking at the lines themselves. And so then for buses, the EIS looked at various bus routes, M23 SBS, the M34 SBS, M11, and M12, and no impacts were identified using the assumptions that I described just a moment ago. However, using a different set of assumptions provided by New York City Transit that are more conservative in that they assume a substantial portion of subway to bus transfers on the M23 SBS from stations at 8th Avenue, 7th Avenue, and 6th Avenue. Using those assumptions, the EIS identifies an impact on the M23 SBS bus in the PM peak period. And mitigation proposed for that impact is to increase bus service by adding 3 additional buses, which is a sort of a typical mitigation proposal that would then be subject to review by New York City Transit, as they constantly sort of continually monitor bus capacity on their various routes. So I'll turn it back to Carrie to discuss loading at the sites. The loading discussion is reflected in the EIS, and Carrie can provide more details.
Thank you very much, Allison. It's a lot of information. Allison, could you just clarify? You said that there are 7 locations, impact locations, but our slide said 6. Which
yes.
one?
It's right. There's so many different ways of reporting all this detail. So it's 6. When you look at the different time periods, it adds up to 7, but it's like 6 in the AM and 6 in the PM.
And there's an overlap.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So loading per se is not part of the DEIS. And as Allison explained, there isn't a finding in the DEIS about loading at the corner of 12th Avenue and 26th Street, or about any impact on pedestrian movement between the mid-block of West 26th Street and 12th Avenue. But we know that it's a difficult stretch of the sidewalk and raises concerns for the community board and for perception, pedestrian safety, and for whatever traffic congestion and conflict there might be with bicycles that also come across 26th Street, pedestrians, and the loading. So we've been looking at that very seriously over the last several years, as the community boards committee knows. And what has evolved from that is that at the Starrett-Lehigh building, they're in the process of reducing the number of active loading berths on West 26th Street by 4. This is not required by the DEIS. This is the initiative of RXR. They're limiting the size of trucks that are going to use the remaining berths on West 26th Street. So they're going to be directing short trucks to West 26th Street and long trucks to 12th Avenue loading berths, which they're increasing from 2 to 3 that are inside of the building. And those loading berths will be used predominantly by large trucks. In addition, RXR has added another loading berth inside the building from West 27th Street. So while they're reducing the number of loading berths overall from 17 to 14, they're increasing the number of loading berths inside that can handle long trucks. That's going to go a long way to helping the traffic situation on West 26th Street and the conflict with pedestrians. They've also committed in the EIS to work with DOT to explore other strategies that would improve the loading operations as part of a comprehensive freight and logistics management plan, with the goal of minimizing conflicts with pedestrians and cyclists, balancing that against the feasibility of doing them in an existing historic building where the loading berth can't be moved into the building, where there are existing tenants and existing mechanisms for unloading and loading cargo, and then getting it to the offices or businesses in the building. So during the time between now and the approval, we're hoping approval at the end of the day. RXR is working with DOT to come up with this management plan. And all of the costs of that plan will be paid for by RXR, and also the implementation costs would be borne by RXR. So in addition, obviously that's related to the pedestrian safety. And what we are doing, even though the actions that we're asking are not increasing pedestrian movements going by the loading area, what we are going to be doing is asking Department of Transportation for signage that would encourage pedestrians to go back towards 11th Avenue, or at 11th Avenue to go north to 27th Street. So basically the idea is to reroute people over to 27th Street. There's also, we're requesting DOT to revisit the permission to install a sidewalk, a crosswalk in the mid-block. This had been broached with DOT before and turned down, but they are now open to looking at that again. There were some technical reasons they turned it down that weren't clearly explained. And so we'll be working with DOT to see if they will in fact allow a mid-block crosswalk. And we're trying to introduce a much more pedestrian-friendly West 27th Street, which serves both to alleviate some of the pedestrian safety issues on 26th Street and serve the project goals of transforming 27th Street into the center and a connection between West Chelsea and the Hudson River Park. There are a couple of other things that the community board had raised in its comments on the draft, on the scope of work for the environmental review. And I wanted to touch on them now also. Oh, before I do that, terminal warehouse, didn't mean to leave you out. Sorry, Andrew. Terminal warehouse is a project, it's as of right project, which you've seen, and it has been approved by Landmarks, has removed all exterior loading from the building and consolidated all the loading berths inside the building at a single location with access from 28th Street. So again, between the two projects, a lot of attention has been given to the loading situation to try to alleviate the congestion on the sidewalks and the streets to the loading situation. Now moving back onto the bicycle usage, which was a question raised by the community board that's not part of the draft environmental impact statement. I was really amazed to hear that RXR has 300 or is planning for 300 bicycle spaces inside the building, and the terminal warehouse building will have 500 bicycle parking spaces, a total of 800 spaces between the two buildings. In addition, around the terminal warehouse building, there are going to be 26 racks that were approved by Landmarks. That means about 50 to 100 spaces for bicycles around the perimeter of terminal warehouse. RXR, on the other hand, was discouraged by Landmarks in putting bicycle racks around the perimeter of the Starrett-Lehigh building. RXR will revisit that issue with Landmarks. Similarly, RXR will revisit the issue of street trees with Landmarks. Landmarks discouraged RXR from putting street trees around the Starrett-Lehigh building, but has approved an additional, I think, 24 street trees, which will includes 22 existing street trees. And so there'll be a total of 26 street trees. Say that 3 times quickly, around the perimeter of the terminal warehouse building. So again, trees, which are interest to the community board, are clearly possible and being effectuated around terminal warehouse. And we'll see if we can get that approval from the Landmarks Commission. Finally, another issue that was touched on by the client is encouragement of local artists. RXR does have program already where they They currently support local artists by presenting their works in various spaces in the building. It's engaged with various local art exhibitions, fair vendors, nonprofit community organizations, and production teams for short-term event activations within the ground floor. And examples of those are something called Future Fairs, Tech World Art Start, and the Estate of Basquiat was there. So these will be continuing as part of its initiative of enlivening not only the Starrett-Lehigh building, West 27th Street, in conjunction with Terminal Warehouse, to make the project area a lively place for people to either pass through on their way to Hudson River Park or to visit for some time. I'd like to mention one thing. I mentioned Hudson River Park. I should have mentioned it at the beginning, but Hudson River Park sent in a letter today to Community Board supporting this proposal. I don't know if it was in your packet, but we did send that to Jesse Bodine today. And now I'd like to turn it over back to Eric and Andrew again to kind of summarize where we see this initiative. So Andrew, I think you were going to go first.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of this and really summing this up, both at the terminal building at Starrett-Lehigh, we're really trying to build upon the work that we've done in those two buildings, right? The alteration that's currently underway. If you drive by terminal, it's a different world over there right now. And RXR has done a lot of work on the Starrett-Lehigh side, and we really want to build upon that, right? As I mentioned earlier, the connection with Hudson Yards and the parks on the east and the west, encouraging a variety of uses that activate our ground floors in a way that really these buildings weren't designed for that, and we're transforming them into something that has that connection with the community and connection with sort of the neighboring communities in a way that doesn't impact traffic by having these bicycle storage in our buildings and encouraging walking and the signage that promotes that. And Carrie touched on a little bit of the art program in Starrett-Lehigh, but one of the really amazing assets we have at the terminal building is our tunnel, right? And for years that has been used in many purposes. I don't think we're ever going to bring back what happened in, let's say, the 90s and early 2000s, but really activating that in a way that ties in with the tenants in the building, the community, and really using it as a space that can be exciting for everyone, touching on both the history as well as where the neighborhood is going. So we're really excited about this, and thank you for having us.
Right. And, again, to Andrew's point, I think, we've covered a lot of ground here. I think just, in closing from RXR's standpoint, I think, many of you have seen the work that's been done on Starrett-Lehigh of the past 6 or so years that we've owned the building. And, for us, this has been really a case study in adaptive reuse of taking a historic asset, really being respectful to its history and its design, but yet moving it forward to the 21st century and making it continue to be relevant to things that change over time. And that kind of underscores, the point Carrie made about our flexibility desires. And as we move forward with this rezoning, making sure that we have a groundwork and a framework for the buildings to continue to be those real case studies for adaptive reuse of historic assets. And again, just, really having a desire to stitch these buildings into the community, provide facilities for the community, engage with the community, and support the community in everything that we do as we move forward.
So thank you, Eric. This basically concludes our presentation, and I'm going to let Elise have the responsibility of once you field the questions, Betty, I guess, is going to be fielding them. She'll direct them to the right person to answer the question or answer them herself. I can't hear you, Betty.
Sorry, I bet everyone's pretty saturated by now. One quick technical question before committee members ask their questions. The final BEIS is about to be available, is that correct?
That's correct. As I think you know, the application was certified today by city planning, and I believe they will post it on their website imminently if they haven't done so already.
But
Okay.
it's the draft it's the official draft EIS.
The draft EIS, and the draft EIS will be published on the city planning website.
Yes, just to jump in, it is posted at this time.
Thank you, Allison.
Okay, thank you, because I think there are some things you presented in the slideshow tonight that we had not read before, I believe. So that was kind of, we need to process some of what you said. So that is a new thing we have to kind of gurgitate.
Betty, if I may, tomorrow we'd be happy to identify for you any pages in the EIS that have or sections that have actually changed.
That would be wonderful if you could identify changes, like, you know, yellow line it or whatever, red line it, because then we wouldn't have to mull
You don't
over.
have to reread the whole thing. I know it's burdensome. Mostly they have to do with the loading and the commitment that's been made to do the loading study with DOT, but any other minor changes, we'll give you a copy that highlights all of the changes. So and write on the email which pages you should look at. So you don't have to read the whole thing.
That would be wonderful. And we do thank you for identifying the issues that we have identified and care about, and attempting one way or the other to address them. So I think we're gonna, I may not have gotten the exact order of when people raised their hands, so be kind to me. I see Paul's hand is raised. Paul?
Of course, my hand is raised. So, you know, Carrie and Elise and Eric, Steve, thanks very much. Again, you know, this is, as you know, an incredible asset for our community, and we're very excited by the opportunity to have some really revitalization going on here. And our concerns have remained consistent in terms of flow of people, flow of traffic, preservation of the building itself, restoring historic character, and not converting this into a destination mall, you know, as we've discussed many times. So I have a couple of specific questions, and I have some general issues I wanted to discuss. Allison, in your presentation, you mentioned there were 3 study locations that could not be mitigated for traffic and 3 locations that could not be mitigated for pedestrians. Could we get, can you just provide us that information, which intersections those were? I know that we just talked about highlighting, but you know, but we'd like to know exactly where those are so we can better understand what that actually means.
Sure. Should I speak to that right now?
I don't know if you have to go into the details of which ones are unmitigated, but you know, as we prepare our comments, we're going to want to understand that a little bit better. So
yeah, we can sort of do a like a more concise summary of the summary.
Yeah, but where are those unmitigated intersections? That's what, because that, if they are on 26th Street, for example, I appreciate the efforts to continue to work with DOT on getting a mid-block crosswalk on 26th. I think that's really important to us. And I'm glad to hear that DOT is starting to shift a little bit, and that maybe we can accomplish that. And I know that we can also try to see if we can apply some political pressure to help with that. And I also appreciate that your efforts in working with LPC to get trees. It seems silly to us that we can't get trees on our sidewalks when they're willing to do lights and bike racks, but they say trees aren't historically relevant. It just seems inconsistent. So thank you for your efforts on getting us those trees.
I think, Paul, that the difference between the terminal warehouse and Starrett is that terminal warehouse is in an historic district, whereas the Starrett-Lehigh building is also individually landmarked, and they're usually a little tougher on the individually landmarked buildings. But as I said, we will go back to them and discuss it.
No, thank you. And again, even though it's individually landmarked, you know, there weren't bike racks in the 1890s. So That's, the fact that we can't have trees there because of that logic doesn't make sense to me. So I appreciate your efforts.
I hear you.
Yeah. It seems to me that, and again, your efforts on loading docks is great. And one of the things, and I know this is retrofitting a building, but one of the things we almost always demand of new construction is that all loading docks are internal. So I'm glad there's more efforts being done to that. I think I'd like to see that any loading docks where trucks are on the sidewalks, that is eliminated. So that the lengths of trucks on loading docks, I want to just make sure that the trucks don't stick out onto the sidewalk as best we can. I appreciate that you have longer internal loading docks, internal berths on 12th Avenue, but any other areas where we can reduce the loading docks that come onto sidewalks would be beneficial. Speaking of bike racks, the bike racks are in there. Let's make sure that they're not on sidewalks, but they are on parking lanes, and they serve as bike corrals. We have pedestrian flow issues. Let's not put the bike racks onto sidewalks where we're going to want pedestrians. So let's make sure that corrals are on the parking lanes. I feel there's a little bit of an inconsistency with the discussion about opening up 27th Street to being a very pedestrian friendly and pedestrian zone, yet there's still loading berths on 27th Street. And so how are we going to resolve that conflict of truck deliveries coming into what is a highly pedestrian zone? And if the focus is to turn 27th Street into a pedestrian zone, I'd like to see if there's a way that we can remove some of those other loading docks. And I know that, this is a big ask, but let's not conflate pedestrian zone and truck loading into one category because they clearly conflict. But then my final issue, and you guys have heard this from me a number of times, and I suspect we'll hear from others, is that within the rezoning, the request to have 15% retail of your gross floor space, we have asked you a number of times to come back to us with alternatives for that and ways to reduce that. We struggle with this building being turned into a destination retail mall facility. And the advertisements that you're pushing out there for the available retail now has the image of available footprint of a football field. So the way you're marketing this property right now is advertising retail the size of a football field. And that's inconsistent with the message you're delivering to us tonight, that our goal is to have local retailers. Our goal is to work with manufacturers within the space to have showcase and showrooms for their own production facilities. So I continue to struggle with this 15% threshold. And we've asked you a number of times to offer some alternative solutions so that we don't just come up with a number of 10 and reduce it, but to work together with you on how we can make this a better facility of having local people, manufacturers inside who are selling their wares out, at the ground floors, whatever. But I'm still anxious to hear about some alternative uses for avoiding big box destination retail taking over this building.
Paul, I perhaps short changed my client when I didn't explain before that we do understand this issue very clearly, and they're committed in the letter that we sent to you dated June 18th to assess the potential for reducing the current proposed 15% cap and using other approaches as well to avoid a perception that a mall atmosphere would exist. So we are committed to working on that and coming up with some approaches that might meet both parties' needs, or at least improve, make a dent in your concern, while maintaining the flexibility that our clients want. And we do look forward to sharing those assessments with you and the community board during this review process.
And Carrie, did you look into top floor retail for drone delivery docks?
Well, I think drones aren't yet allowed in Manhattan, so it's a little premature, but I love that idea anyway. It kind of scares me to think of drones flying around the streets zooming between buildings, but
No,
Okay.
we're thinking about the future.
yeah,
All right.
right.
Okay, so I think,
Thank you.
thank you, Paul. Viren?
Yes, thank you, Paul. I think you covered one of the major sort of issues that I wanted to raise. The amount of retail space is the major concern for the community, and we've been asking for it consistently, as you said. My question to you is, how do you preclude that from happening? Because at the same time, you're asking for use group 10A, which is unlimited square feet for any kind of retail. That's number one. Number two, currently you have close to 100,000 square feet advertised on your website on the 4th floor, which is open to being taken up by any retailer or for any kind of use. It's not very clear. So how do you preclude that mall size stores will not come about? And why would you then ask for use group 10A if you are making an effort to kind of keep the building, the retail footprint as small as possible? That's number one. Number two, which is a kind of a question that ties back into the first question, is industrial retention is a big push in the city. Across Brooklyn, what is happening, as you know, Industry City and the Navy Yard and the Greenpoint, some of the areas are not even being allowed to be converted to any kind of residential or non-manufacturing use. We have a manufacturing building. You're asking for upzoning that manufacturing zone. Why not sort of push for the industrial retention and keep some of the manufacturing use and production uses in place? I mean, these two buildings and the entire manufacturing zone that we have in our district have the opportunity to become a design district or an innovation hub, to a home to cities, very interesting design creators, and even office community that actually has something to do with production, textile, lighting, interior furniture production, and fabrication. So why not think along those lines and de-emphasize the push for retail? It's a very long-winded question. I have two more questions after that. So do you want me to pause here and let you respond first?
Let me just briefly respond to those comments. First of all, in terms of the retail mall, I think we feel very strongly that these two buildings will never look like retail malls because they're historic buildings where there will not be changes on the exterior. So we certainly have that going for us. And clients are certainly committed, as we said, to marketing to local retailers, and particularly in the terminal warehouse where it's undergoing an as-of-right renovation now. There will be new users soon. So they're really consciously curating what's going to be in the building. And I would also, one interesting thing that I wasn't really aware of is that only 9% of the visitors that will come to these, to the destination, to the larger retail uses will come by car. So it's never going to be, and that's because we're in the middle of Manhattan, right? And if you think of the larger retail stores in areas like this in Manhattan, people do not drive. So it's really, there really is not going to be a mall type atmosphere here. But we've heard you, we understand it's a concern, and it's something that we are continuing to study to determine if we can reduce that 15% of use group 10A uses. So that to be continued. On the question of industrial retention, certainly with respect to the terminal warehouse, there's nothing to retain right now. There are no manufacturing uses in the building now. But I think more importantly than that, terminal warehouse has a concept of a really modern, state-of-the-art office building where there are going to be, interesting young tech companies and so on in this building. So there will be commercial uses, and there will be a real vibrant commercial activity there, but not manufacturing. I think, Eric, do you want to comment about Starrett-Lehigh?
So I think just to kind of hit that specifically, Starrett-Lehigh is an occupied building and occupied with a variety of the types of tenants that you've mentioned. We have, photo studios, we have designers, we have fashion design. We've got, the litany of those types of uses that you've described, and those tenants are, in the building, long-term leases at this point. So, Starrett has always been a diverse type of clientele and a diverse type of tenancy. So, we're looking at a very, relatively small percentage of the building to be converted to, or possibly converted to these type 10A uses. But it is a large building, so those small percentages get exacerbated. But we've always had and will continue to have that kind of diverse type of tenant mix. And I think evidence in some of the other projects we've done elsewhere in the city, particularly a project we've done in Long Island City, the term industrial has to evolve with the times, just as we say, retail has evolved and will continue to evolve. The definition of manufacturing industrial evolves. So again, Starrett is positioned to evolve with those changes. And so, quick example, we have a tenant in the building that was manufacturing and designing electronics. It's not the manufacturing that was in the building when the building was built in the 1930s, but it's still a type of manufacturing that's now an evolved definition of the term. So, always thinking about the future and being flexible and adapting the building over time has been a real important staple of, our strategy for the building.
Yeah,
that's a good. I think that's a good point that was made. Viren, could we circle back to you?
Just want to clarify what I meant by industrial retention. I didn't mean that you retain the usage that you retain the tenants that you have currently in the building. You retain the use. In other words, if you look at Greenpoint and Industry City, industrial retention translates that you actually invite more of manufacturing and production spaces into the building, so you retain the manufacturing use. All right, so that's where I think, and you're right, the term manufacturing and industrial are evolving, and I think we should keep up with that, and we have an opportunity here to do so. That's my main point. I have two other points, but I can wait, Betty, if you want to come back to me.
Okay. Thank you, Viren. Twee?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Paul for his comments having to do with the bikes, because when I heard 300 spaces and 500 spaces, that's like larger than coat check type, numbers. So to suggest where they should be designated really helps. But I also agree with Paul in terms of if they're going to push people from 26th to 27th and make 27th an outdoor space, it seems a sort of like a double whammy of we're going to encourage outdoor space, but then push pedestrians to 27th to make another concern with the crowd flow. The last thing was just sort of a fun anecdotal fact. Paul, I was wondering if I should mention this, but I had the pleasure of meeting Paul in person right before Memorial Day last month. And we were on 26th Street. Too bad Christine isn't on here. And we were walking, I think, along the sidewalk. There's scaffolding as it current. Then it was scaffolding. If David was able to visit the area, maybe he can say if it's still there. But because of scaffolding and the cobblestone, there were cars that were literally coming up on the sidewalk to bypass trucks that were parked on the street because there wasn't enough width. So we had to get out of the way and cross the street. So it's not, I don't know if those things will be solved. It seems, sort of not populated enough now to have anyone regulate that, but maybe with this development that will be better regulated. Thanks.
Yeah, I will say that, Eric, you're very glad that Christine did not witness that experience of the loading. The loading truck had stopped on 27th Street. And because of the scaffolding and the truck couldn't turn inside the building, so it's unloaded from the street in the middle of the day. And then the only way that vehicles could bypass the loading truck was to literally go on the sidewalk between the scaffolding columns and through the curb cut along the sidewalk and then back out west of where the truck was loading. So we would appreciate you looking into that and trying to avoid that in the future.
That's a very important point. And in Hell's Kitchen, because of scaffolding, there was a woman who was hit by a car or truck, and because there was no site allowance. But anyway, hopefully that kind of thing is temporary.
Was this on 27th or 26th? Sorry, I just want to make sure I look into it.
Paul, was it 26th or 27th?
I believe it was on 27th. You have scaffolding, 27th is cobblestoned, right? And the scaffolding up right now. And there's a loading dock, an entry. It had to have been 27th. I'll look. I'll come back to. I'll look on the map and figure out exactly where we were walking. I think it was 27th mid block. There's a garage sort of entrance where a truck could go in and load, but they couldn't turn because of the scaffolding, so they just stopped on the street to unload. And then they just blocked traffic.
But that could be that you guys need to look into that if the scaffolding is still there. Bert?
Yeah, I'm not going to reiterate what Paul said, what Viren said. I agree absolutely with both. I do want to say that two things. One, when we say we want to avoid a mall, it has nothing to do with, a mall is not made by the architecture of the surrounding the retail or the location. The mall is made by the nature of the retail. And that's what we're really talking about. Because it's in a landmark building doesn't prevent it from becoming a mall. It's the nature of the retail. And that's what we're trying to avoid, the large big box retail. And I'm not in marketing, but we're talking about industrial, we're talking about designers. Have an actual program of trying to get people that would actually be producing in the building and selling from the building. A program, emphasize that in what you're looking for, rather than talking about the size or this or that. Because you did say someplace that you're going to go look for local people. I'm not sure how you go, you're not going to knock on doors on 8th Avenue or 9th Avenue or 6th Avenue, say, come on over to 11th. We got a better space. I don't know if that's what you're going to do, but whatever program you're going to do about that, you can certainly create a program to get production facilities connected directly with retail facilities in the same building. That would we really much appreciate. It's a great project. Thank you.
Okay, good point, Bert. David?
With Bert, and if you look at the old Special West Chelsea zoning district, it committed itself to arts-related uses, which is what the neighborhood is about. If there were a way we could programmatically encourage that, or maker spaces, it would definitely make this a unique kind of thing. It's what parts of Brooklyn are all about. It would be much more exciting than just a lot of retail. And, I know we've talked a lot about signage already tonight, but the issue of the signage on the Chamford corners, we were shown a historic photo of that, but I have to say that I feel the pain of the original architects when they must have seen the sign on that Chamford corner. I don't think it works with the original design intent, and there are in fact windows on those corners. I'm not sure I'm on board with using them for signage. And unfortunately, my video dropped out when you were discussing the 75-foot limit on illuminated signage. Is there any chance we could go back to the slides that were discussed then?
Sure.
Can we go, guys? Applicant, can we go back to the slide?
Gio's working on it.
He's working on
it.
Oh. Well, you know what is a problem, at least what I see on this slide, is that all our faces, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, are covering the corner on the slide. I don't know if you can
change
nudge
your
the side.
view, Betty?
What?
Can you change your view? There's a way, I'm not the expert either, but you can, my pictures of your faces are on the side of the slide.
Yeah, change your view to speaker view with side view, side-by-side gallery. And then you can also expand.
So then you can
slide the image to make it larger on your screen as well.
I can slide the image. How about that? No,
between the speakers and the image on the presentation, like
well, I don't want to slow anything up. So keep talking.
But I'm saying it for everyone's benefit too. Anybody else can slide the image larger.
Okay, actually, the slide that's up right now that shows the corner, you can see how
I see it. I see it. I did something. I pushed some button.
you can see how the second and third floor have these kind of conventional windows that have piers in between them. And that even goes around the corner where the chamfered glass is. And then at the third floor, it magically turns into these ribbon windows that go around the corner, you know, curving. And it's a nice kind of contrast to maintain. I'd hate to lose that to simply having signs at the chamfered corner. I do realize that that's kind of premium space for advertising because it faces in two directions. But I think that it really detracts from the architecture. And then I wanted to ask about the change for height of illuminated siding or signage. So if there's another image, was there one, or could you tell me about the rationale for changing the requirement, the limitation on illuminated signage?
Yes. The rules on the portion of the building that are within 500 feet of the corner allow for, I better get my notes here, allow for signage to be up to 75 feet. And what we wanted to be able to do is match the heights that are allowed in the mid block. The reason we want to do that is that the side of the building is visible from the High Line. That's one of the primary reasons. And so we wanted people to be able to see building identification from the distance at the higher elevation. Now, that's only to do with the illuminated signage. The zoning does allow, right now that the illuminated is only allowed up to 58 feet. Signage is allowed on the corner up to 75 feet.
Are you talking about 75 feet off the ground?
Yes.
Okay.
It's allowed. And all we're asking is that the signage that's allowed up to 75 feet include illuminated signs. Now, the actual position of them, meaning relative to the building and how they affect the building and the windows and so on, is going to be in large measure something that would have to be, I mean, 100%, it has to be approved by the Landmarks Preservation Commission. So I'm not saying that you're going to see a new sign that looks like this rental sign on the corner. This photograph is intended to show you A, the chamfered corner, and B, that the angle of the sign is what we're looking for permission to do. The zoning today would not allow that angle.
Right, but for the illuminated signage, 75 feet off the ground, I mean, we're talking about well above where this photo shows. It would be
That's correct.
presumably possibly over where the continuous ribbon windows are.
That's correct.
And it might be something like the Google sign on the building on 9th Avenue across from Chelsea Market.
I can't speak to that. I don't know that they have a corner sign on the Google building.
It's not a corner sign, but you know, you're talking about two separate things. One is allowing signage on the chamfered corners, which go up 3 stories. And the other is having illuminated signs that are 75 feet off the ground.
They're the same. That's the same point. We're looking for signage to be allowed. The angle of the sign is one thing for any sign, and the second is the height of illumination.
In other words, right at this point where you've got the chamfered corner, you could have a 75-foot tall sign that was illuminated.
Now we could, well, that's what we would be looking for, yes.
I can't buy into that, you know, and I understand that it would need to be approved by landmarks, but, you know, why change zoning to allow something that you would never want landmarks to approve?
No, it's that you want something new that's not
That's
not
right.
allowed now.
We want
right?
something new that's not allowed now, and we want to deal with the angle issue because the zoning regulations were written basically assuming that buildings had right angle corners, which this building doesn't have. So there's an angle issue and then there's an illumination issue. Signage is allowed to 75 feet right now. Non-illuminated and indirectly illuminated is allowed up to 75 feet. If I'm, Gio, if I'm wrong, jump in. But
And where the red arrow is,
that's only to point to what's a chamfered corner. That's not a height.
it's not a height
No.
indicator.
No.
So the 75 would be above that.
Yes. in all
75
ways.
is almost 7 stories up.
Can you go to the slide that showed that, please?
It would be
We don't have a slide of
useful.
that.
It would be useful if you had an illustration. Do you have an illustration?
We do not have an illustration of a proposed or a hypothetical sign that would be on the chamfered corner, consistent with this proposal.
It would be really useful, maybe even a sketch or something, you know?
I mean, I think a 75-foot tall illuminated sign, I mean, you're talking Times Square scale there.
The sign itself wouldn't be, from 0 to 75 feet. It's at the elevation of 75 feet. The amount of signage is limited by other provisions of the zoning. How much can be on this, how many square feet of sign is limited by the zoning. We're not affecting that.
What is that amount, Carolyn?
I don't know, Cole. I'm happy to give it to you, but I don't have all those notes right now.
That's the critical question, I think.
Okay, well, we can get back to you and give you the exact square footage of the amount of signage that would be allowed. We, I think, are limited here in how much square footage of signage would be allowed on the chamfered corner.
Oh, that would be, yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, we're happy to provide that
Okay.
to you.
But I think Betty, David's point is actually slightly different. Even if zoning allows it, landmarks might not.
That's correct. But we can't even
It
go to
would be good to
landmarks with the
know.
request.
Yeah,
unless we get
I
this-
don't want you going to landmarks with the request. You know,
hear
sometimes
you.
they approve things we don't love. I don't see why they ever would approve it. And, it's an iconic building. This is the hallmark modern landmark in Chelsea, and those ribbon corner windows that so fluidly wrap around are that's what it's all about. Why would you allow an illuminated sign 70 feet off the ground stuck right on one?
Okay, why don't we, it's getting late, guys.
Yeah, okay, enough signage for the night.
Right, well, just let's, I think Carrie has her hand up and Michael has his hand up. So why don't we, and now Brad has his hand up. Let's
And you're
go
gonna come
on.
back to me, Betty.
And you're gonna be after people who didn't talk yet, okay? So Carrie?
Unfortunately, I was going to ask about the signs as well. And I just one more question that maybe you can clarify for us. Are they only facing west, or you said the High Line, so they'd be facing east, which is, there's also a lot of residential buildings there. So are those 75-foot illuminated signs like facing right in someone's window? Can you maybe, if you could just clarify a little, to Dave's point before, a little more information about what that exactly is, where they would be,
We're happy to do that.
Okay, so-
including location, like, are they facing residential buildings? Are they facing?
Okay, that's a good question. And I think Carrie says they will get back to us
Yes.
about that.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. And now we have Mike.
Yeah, my question, I had this before, was about the square footage issue. As an example, that sign that we see in the illustration, the one that's on the Chamford corner right now, what is the approximate square footage of that sign, for example?
Listen, I'm happy to get that answers. We didn't measure it. This is an historic sign, and we're using the photograph just for illustrative purposes to show you where the chamfered corner was and what the type of sign, the angle of the sign. So we're happy to try to come up with an estimate. That's not my forte as a lawyer. And we will give you an illustration as you've asked and give you the details about facing residential district residential building, which I don't think we are, and
Okay.
the square footage of that particular sign.
Great, okay. Brad?
Yes, Betty, thank you. Obviously, two beautiful buildings. My question is for the board, Betty. So the board is for the rezoning, right? To add them to the Chelsea
West
special
Chelsea
district.
Yes.
Right.
Well, I mean,
So
we
that's
have
something-
a history of advocating that.
And the reason we want to do it is that we want to allow them to activate the bottom space, right?
We never said that in so many words. We just felt that these were two very, very significant and important buildings in West Chelsea, and they should be part of the district. And special districts will allow you to tinker with the zoning and give them more flexibility. So that's the general, we never opined on the first floor or the fifth floor. No details.
But now that we're at the details, to me, it's very clear. They want signage on the building that will say, you know, Amazon for our beautiful Starrett-Lehigh building, right? Because they're mainly 100% occupied commercial building. Activate the bottom floor, which unfortunately, I don't know, those slats turned out not wonderful, but we'll drop that. We're gonna close down 27th Street, what's gonna happen, and make it a pedestrian zone, and they'll have delivery times to bring in the trucks, which I'm okay for. And for us to think that it's not gonna be a Chelsea market at the other building, it's hard for me for our board not to understand that. And also regarding the trucks on 12th Avenue, which is really tough. I know they're going inside the building, but they have a Target in Hell's Kitchen now. And it's not about what's being brought in the building. It's about all the trucks waiting to get in. And I'm sure one of our members here from traffic can talk about that. So I just want us to live in reality. You know, we can't restrict the developer. We're giving them the go-ahead to go ahead and do what you want. So for me, I would love another Chelsea market there. And I would love to have the road shut down on 27th and more bikes. And of course I want drones, but you know, I just think we gotta live in reality. And they were very clear when they just said the new armory is going to be high-tech companies. There's no manufacturing. That's not what they're changing the whole building for. So I just want us to live in a little bit in reality where it's going. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brad. I think Kit is next.
Could I make one comment that, excuse me, to frame, just to make sure everybody understands? The building is still going to be allowed to be used for the M2 uses, and only 25% of the building is going to be allowed to be used for these special use group K uses. So the opportunities will still exist, and the clients can, are going to be dealing with their marketing, but the building, these use changes are only for a fraction of either building. They're not going to be changed. It's just the opportunity to change the use. And we have not discussed closing 27th Street. We just was talking about having pedestrians directed in that direction. There certainly, we would like to explore the possibility that there would be more activation of 27th Street, perhaps partial closing, shared streets. We don't know. It's just something that we're thinking of, and actually was something we've shared with leadership before about how to make this an active, interesting area. But there's been no proposal presented to you or to city planning that the street be closed and be pedestrianized in its entirety.
But that's understood, Caroline, but what I'm getting at is we're on these boards for years. This is the progression, which is fine. For someone to sit here to say that that's not where it's going, you just said it's probably going to go that route, which I'm okay with.
Okay.
I just want to make sure our board's on the same page there.
Thank you, Brad.
Okay, I think Kit.
Yeah, thanks, Betty. I'll try to be brief because I know that it's late. But I have an idea that's a little bit different than what's been discussed that could potentially help this project integrate with the neighborhood in a bit of a different way, which is if we reduce the 15% cap on the retail, maybe a very small amount of that space could be for the community and specifically for a school or a school program. I think an interesting model is what happened in the Brooklyn Navy Yard with the Brooklyn Steam Center. They took a very, very small amount of space to run a program that's a half-day program. It pulls from 6 Brooklyn high schools, and it gives kids CTE experiences that give them a license or a certificate or college credits in a field where they'll go on to be hopefully employed in an industry that's represented in the Brooklyn Navy Yard's ecosystem. Thinking about, these 2 buildings being part of sort of a broader corridor and being a part of the neighborhood, it could be an interesting way for the project to have a little bit more appeal to the community and also become a little bit more of a, permanent way of giving back to the community. So I don't know if it's too late stage for a left field idea like that, but just wanted to put it out there.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I don't think it's a left field idea. Our proposed zoning will allow, as Carrie said, community facilities, including schools, other than community facilities with sleeping accommodations. Unlike the Navy Yard, where they had to do a zoning override to allow that school to go in, which I'm familiar with. Here, schools would be permitted as of right. So it's certainly schools and colleges are the types of uses that our clients could explore in the future. And if there is a school that you know of or that the community knows of that's interested, I'm sure they'd be happy to talk about it. But our proposed zoning will facilitate that type of thing, to happen in the future.
That's helpful. And I would just quickly add that the Brooklyn Steam Center is expanding to Union Square as their second site, and then potentially expanding more in the city and outside of the city. So they could actually be a fit for this project.
Oh, thank you, Kit. Two good ideas in one night. You're hitting home runs. That's great. And the fact that it's as of right, according to the zoning, that might be something I would think something like that we could put in our letter, and maybe your clients could make an effort in some of our ideas to reach out to really try to get certain uses in it. Other uses have been discussed. I'm going to go back to Viren. I know Mike spoke before. Is there anyone's hand up? Paul, is there anyone I'm missing whose hands up? No. Okay.
Unless are we opening to the public at all? I don't know if any.
Yeah, we should.
There is somebody in the public who
but
wants
we
to
have
speak.
to be. No, you don't see any public people?
There is one person from the public. So let's do
Oh,
Vera
one.
to think it's the public.
Okay, and it's getting really late, guys, so let's try to be concise.
No, I'm
Viren.
going to make it quick. Keith got to it before I did. What I was proposing is that look at Industry City and look at Brooklyn Yard as examples from which you can actually learn about programming that might be much more conducive to what the community is looking for. That is one point that I wanted to make, but Keith made it much better than I would have. The second thing I wanted to ask you is the historical train tunnel in Terminal Warehouse, will that become a pedestrian thoroughfare? Or, you're saying that you're going to open it up to multiple programming, but is that all going to be internal to the building, or is it going to be a public access to the waterfront through that tunnel? That's my question, number one. And the question number two is the 27th Street sidewalk cafes that you're proposing, would they compromise pedestrian space, or are you actually planning to sort of make clear that the pedestrians will also still have the right of way?
Okay, two good points. So I think just to reiterate that Viren's talking about in terminal warehouse, that middle area, would it be a public walkway from the east to the west to get to the waterfront park? That's number one. And number two is the location of the cafes, and would it they continue to allow for enough pedestrian walkway?
Andrew, can you respond to those questions?
Sure. So on, as it relates to the tunnel right now opens from sort of 11th to 12th Avenue. It is enclosed, right? It is an indoor space, but we plan to have double-sided retail. So retail would open on to 27th and to the tunnel. So we would expect that to have a lot of, open flow, right? So people could walk on 27th or they could walk through the tunnel. Obviously, we'd want the flexibility to have, events in there. So certain times it might be closed, or, certain hours, we close it for cleaning and security. But we would want that to be one of the main thoroughfares connecting the park on the west and 11th Avenue. And then the second question, what was that?
The sidewalk cafes.
Sidewalk cafes. Yeah.
Room for pedestrians.
Sidewalk cafes. Essentially, our proposal would be to have zoning compliant sidewalk cafes. So there would be the minimum distance required on sidewalks, and we would not be encroaching on that pedestrian space.
Okay. Paul or Jesse, can you help shift the person over for?
It looks like we have a Richard Barth who has his hand up. So
yeah, I believe Richard is part of the.
He's part of the team.
Part of the team. I tried to bring him over before. Oh,
now you did.
No, he's there. Now he has his hand down. So.
Oh, so he's not.
Yeah.
Not asking a question.
Yeah, I tried to bring him over multiple times before, but he didn't come over. So.
So is there somebody else from the public?
No,
that was it.
We're fine.
We're done with that. Okay. So guys, it's now 10:15. So let me see if I can hit on the points that were made so we can get a vote tonight. And Paul, you can help me as well. Of course, I take all my notes very carefully. Let's see. There's sub area K and the special West Chelsea district, just the extension. Okay, I'm just going to try to make a kind of a little quickie list for us, a cheat sheet on that. There's a big topic of the big box worries. The big box worry, and but we got two very constructive suggestions about educational facilities and something about industrial city model. Okay, just stay with me. Don't go away. We got concerns. We have concerns. The loading versus pedestrians conflict. Let me see. Let me see if we have the corner and the signage. But that one, I don't know if we want to wait on, because the applicant is committed to supplying us with some better illustrations. We can talk about that, whether we want to postpone that or whether we just want to make a statement now. Then there's the whole SECRA and and intersections that can't be mitigated. I don't know how we can deal with that now because we haven't read the final DEIS. Let me just see if what other stuff we have on this. Okay, Paul, help me out. What have I not listed?
All right, so we have the inconsistency of the loading docks on 27th. We have the loading dock issue blocking sidewalks. We have bike racks being on parking lanes, not streets. We have a refocus on making sure that we get trees along the space. We have
how could I forget the trees?
We have a refocus on working with creative tenants to have manufacturers have retail space within the facility. We have a problem with, we're going to oppose any request for illumination of signs at 72 feet even on the chamfered corners. Although Elise and Carrie have agreed to provide more sort of sketches of what that would actually look like before we take a position on that. We have a push for making sure that sidewalk cafes don't impede pedestrian traffic flow on the blocks of the cafe areas. You know, and I'll throw back my thing that, you know, the 15% of retail, you know, we have to still kind of work on a solution. And Carrie and Elise, I look forward to hearing more from you on that. You know, we may have to take a position of just reducing it to 10. We might have to say a cap on total square footage of any single-use retailer. You know, if we don't hear something creative soon, we're going to probably have to take a position that does reduce that. And that has been the consistency that 15% is too high.
So Paul, to your point, I'm not sure how to vote on this. Without that position taken.
Can I make a suggestion, Paul?
Yes, Jesse.
So, I mean, this is literally just certified today, right? We have till the end of July, to be voted out of full board. This then goes into its normal process. Caroline, tell me if I'm wrong. Elise, tell me if I'm wrong. It goes to the borough president. It's going to go back to the city planning commission. It's going to go to the city council. We have done this in the past where if there are some significant outstanding items that we know will most likely not be, you know, completely resolved between now and our full board vote, that we put in language to say, you know, the backstop is either the borough president's review or even the city council review to say, you know, we would, you know, you can say whether you're in favor with conditions or not in favor unless, you know, deny unless, but that it be resolved by X time or by the X vote in the process. So that allows, that gives everybody time to work out a solution, but it's clear that you're saying what you expect there to be by that time. And, you know.
Okay, I don't know, Paul, how you feel about it, but that seems like a very rational thing. We could identify that there are some serious issues. You know, here are some options and the applicant is working on it. And, you know, we expect it to be resolved as the item goes through. Something like that, Paul?
Yeah, yes, and Carrie, the thing is that we can take our position now. You know, we've been working with this team for a long time on these issues and trying to iron out a lot of them, and it's very accommodating. We've made great progress on this, but, you know, at a certain point, because of the deadline, we'll just have to draw a line in the sand and make our statement. And then if changes come along after that, because of, as Jesse pointed out, the process goes through multiple stages, then we'll have other opportunities to continue our discussions. But I think that, you know, our one consistent thing is the retail space, that 15% is too high. And we're trying to look for a solution to that.
And we realize that the applicant is also trying to have a creative solution to the topic. So,
And maybe it's, you know, again, it could be uses groups 3 and 4 allow for academic. Maybe we increase that percentage and decrease the 10A percentage to accommodate the schools. Maybe we have a cap on the total square footage for individual space. Like there are alternatives that we can come up with. So let's work to try to find a solution.
So, Carrie?
It might be helpful in that process for us to re-explain how the 25% and the 15% work, because right now with the 25%, you could have a school occupy, in our proposal, if there were such a school, it could occupy up to 25% of the building. That's our current proposal.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not likely to happen, but it could.
Right, that'd be a massive school. But I think you're right that there is, but maybe the way is to tinker with just the 10A use and maybe expand the 3 and 4 use. Maybe instead of just having the percentage on retail, have an increased percentage on the other uses or something. I mean, I think there's another way to work it.
I don't want to drag this out. We could have this conversation after the meeting, but the EIS only studied up to that 25% for academic use and a certain portion of it. And so we're really limited by what the EIS studied.
Right.
So,
Well, we recommended before the EIS study that we do more of that then too. So
more than 25% of the building?
No, more academic use back then. We had always promoted less retail throughout the process.
All right.
Okay.
Wait, this is very weedy, so let's.
Yeah, it's very detailed. So we're happy also to have conversations with the committee or with leadership in the interim. So we keep working with you. We've done a lot, and we're working with you. We've done an awful lot.
But to address Carrie's question, Carrie, what we're voting on is what we and knowing that the applicant is working with us on these issues, that we as a committee are going to take a stand on something and take a position. Yes. And then we're going to push that vote forward and push that into our letter.
Understood.
Sounds good.
So
thank you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was to Carrie Keenan.
Oh,
yes, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So
thank you, Paul.
We have some things that I think we're comfortable with, and then we have other things that we have issues with. For instance, adding sub area K to the Special West Chelsea District. I did not hear anyone objecting to that. And also the rezoning to the other M district. I heard no discussion or qualms about that. We have a lot to say about the retail on the ground floor, and worries about big box. We have some wonderful idea loading versus pedestrians. The corner signage and illumination, concern about that. Bike racks not on the sidewalk. We want the trees. I didn't mention earlier that we have the 26th Street DOT issue with the crosswalk mid-block that the applicant is trying to revisit with DOT, which we appreciate. We have the sidewalk cafe not obstructing pedestrian flow. And I think that for now, there may be some other, pardon me?
Very sorry, public access to the tunnel.
Public access to the tunnel? And there is already. Baron? Oh, Baron, unmute. Are you saying like confirm public access through, how's that? Confirm public access through the tunnel. Okay. Okay. So, could we live with this list for now? Could we, Are you okay on this? Can we
Will
take?
someone make a
position?
motion?
Motion to live with the list.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kit. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? No. Is there anyone abstaining? Conflict of interest? Okay, so thank you. Unanimous. And we
Sorry,
will,
Pam just
Paul
raised
and
her
I,
hand. Wait,
Paul and I will
Betty,
draft this
Betty,
up.
Betty, stop. Pam just raised her hand.
Oh, what?
Aye.
That was a yes.
Aye.
Okay.
That's a yes.
Yeah, okay, we were just doing hands, but that's okay.
I did mine.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Okay, so you all have really given your all. It's almost 10:30. So can we have a motion to adjourn?
If Jesse allows us, will Jesse allow us?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Hey, Jesse.
Thank you,
Bye, everybody.
applicant.
Good night.
Hey,
We'll
Jesse.
we'll be in touch.
Jesse.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks,
I'm
Elise.
here. I'm here.
Yeah, just wondering, I missed the vote sheet. When was that sent out?